Well, the news has really caught up to us, hasn't it? Oh, boy.
It's been chasing us for weeks.
After 100 short years, there has been another death, another man that we all greatly admire, which means that's right, boys. It's a emergency podcast. You haven't heard this noise. Oh, my God.
Oh, wow. Is that new? Wow.
Yeah,
love.
there's always new sounds. All 3 times that I've used this.
I didn't like that.
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all.
Well, it doesn't like you.
Okay.
It has said nasty things behind your back.
But yes, normally we record on Sundays, but today we are recording on Thursday, November 30.
No, we can't give away the secrets of our production schedule.
We are located
because
on a boat
in the Hudson
River.
middle of the Hudson River.
Yeah.
But yes, we of course are celebrating the death of Henry Kissinger. Rest in shit, you horrible fucking man.
Yeah. He died.
He died.
He sure did.
And it's good that he died.
R.I.P. Heinz.
And
that was his actual first name.
AJ,
Heinz Kissinger.
I think you found something
If you
that
hit
you
him hard
sort
enough,
of
ketchup would come out.
Yeah.
I
Still
think
does. So full of it.
I think you found something, AJ, that you wanted to share with us, right?
So this is an obituary that I found to be particularly apt for our dear departed Henry, and it goes a little something like this. Leading actress in minor parts in major new musical.
Wait a minute.
Job details. Description. New musical starring Aaron Lazar, Norm Lewis, Tim Howard, Doug Krieger, and introducing James Good.
More like James Bad.
More helpless.
Okay.
We have auditioned.
Also, sorry, this is an obituary, right? Just making sure.
Yes, it's an obituary for something.
Keep going.
We have auditioned over 1,500 singer/actresses for our leading lady.
That's a lot.
We have auditioned unknowns, huge Broadway stars, and even movie/pop stars, and not found the perfect girl who can find the place within her to open and sing from her heart and soul and hit low alto notes and high soprano notes
This is all one
and make
sentence.
the producers cry.
In that perfect girl's name, Henry Kissinger.
The part requires a full voice belt to be in E flat above high C.
Whoa.
And head voice A flat above high C. In addition to the lead role, we're looking for a couple of guys and one more woman to play minor roles.
We're a couple of guys. We can submit for this.
We're making trouble in Kissinger's neighborhood.
We're a throuple of guys.
That's gonna get us some fan art.
I sure fucking hope not.
The women would sing 2 parts, a child's mother, 8 measures, and about 40 measures of a sadistic nurse giving a shot.
Hold on. 8 bars of an average human mother?
Yes.
We need the
mother.
greatest human talent on all of planet Earth to sing 48 measures in our musical.
Yes, for the minor parts, not for the main role. This is a separate.
These are okay.
These are 2 separate roles.
Wait, so sorry.
gotcha.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting the flow. This is
you're not.
very strange obituary.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We're getting to the accomplishments. Don't worry.
Interestingly,
we're
the person who wrote this died 30 years ago. Yeah.
There hasn't been a post on Playbill in 30 years.
Back when Henry Kissinger was only 70 years old. Yeah.
The men would be playing soldiers, a pretty decent amount of singing, and you need to keep up and sound as good as the 4 Broadway legends listed above.
Right.
One of the soldier
There's
extras
no way
could
these
be
legends,
female too.
There's no way these people are involved, right? This is like a classic, like, I don't pay anything, it's non-union, I'm the most delusional man alive. You see this on Backstage all the time, but like, he fucking name dropped Norm Lewis.
Yeah, I was going to say, the listing said that when you're singing, you need to be able to hang with Norm Lewis when you're singing.
Yes, and
I don't think so.
Well, here's the thing. They do have a demo recording of Aaron Lazar doing one of the songs.
Okay.
It's called Without You. And you know what? Thank God there's finally a song called Without You in musical theater.
Right.
Yeah.
I prefer the minor characters come from Boston. However, you can come from anywhere. We cannot pay travel for the minor characters, but if we hire you, we will give you $150 a day per diem on top of pay if outside of New England.
What?
Alicia, the leading lady, could come from anywhere on Earth.
Anywhere on
travel will be
Earth?
paid if we find her on Earth.
Oh my God.
It's been a journey. A couple rules, as this is our second time advertising the
Rules?
show. Number one,
Okay.
we are not going to respond to everyone.
Oh.
The casting department is not going to respond to anyone who even remotely sounds like they are auditioning us. We're just going to delete your
Just
entry.
a lot of people submitting being like, this seems like it's not legit. But anyway, here's my submission. They're like, no, we're totally legit.
You can audition us, read the script, listen to the score if you want a Tony, or ask us about the project.
Wait, sorry, say that again. You can do these things if you want a Tony?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why you're scouring Playbill for what seems to be the worst job opportunity of all time.
All right, keep going.
Number two.
Okay.
If you're auditioning for a minor part, send your normal reel of singing.
Okay.
If you're auditioning for the lead,
I'm going to send my abnormal reel of singing.
I've made one off of this podcast. If you are auditioning for the lead, I highly recommend you sing the song Never Enough from Greatest Showman. If you can't sing that song and blow people away, you won't get this part. However, if you are not able to prepare that in time, maybe you're traveling for holidays and not in your home studio.
It is, in fact, December, yes.
Then
Start of the arguing season.
Yeah, what about it? Then make sure when you submit your reel, you are singing a song with at least a high D belt, preferably an E flat or F, and let us know the timestamp. We are hoping to look at 10,000 unknown singers, and we will not kill our budget in auditions. The age of the girl is 24 in the show. I would suggest women audition between the ages 21 and 35.
This man just wants to have sex with whoever this is going to be.
He only has sex with people who can belt an E flat.
Yeah, same.
Lastly, we are in the process of a $150 million raise.
Raise?
Yes. Broadway shows cost $25 million, and the most expensive ever, Spider-Man, cost $70 million.
And that did so
Famously good production that was really well controlled in terms of its cap
everyone
cost.
likes it.
I love the pivot of the most expensive ever Spider-Man cost $70 million immediately into do not waste our time. If you are not professional and make commitments you cannot keep, it will not be good for your career.
Okay.
If you get this part, Tony Award winner, by the way.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how to do your career, Tony Award winning actor. If you get this part, you will become the biggest star in the world.
Oh my God, what?
As far as job end date, it is listed as end of May. However, it's an average 4-day job after preparation for the lead.
What?
Union
After
membership,
preparation?
not necessary. It's just a single 1 to 4 hour session for the minor parts.
What?
Most of the cast on this record will be in the final show. However, this audition is for the album to help us raise the most ever raised in history for a theater show.
The $150 million Broadway production?
Duration, November 30th, 2023 through no end date. Salary, $500 to $1,500 per day.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
He is survived by his family.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast that pays $500 to $1,500 per day. I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Brian's.
And I'm the worst of all possible Josh's. Hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah.
If this is your first time listening to our show, welcome aboard.
AJ's just been shouting this whole time.
Yeah.
I got very excited.
Well, and it was excited, and when you get excitable, it's great. Yeah. So this is the worst of all possible worlds, and every week we do a case study in the pop culture of a dying empire, mostly this one.
And we are now on year 3 of memorializing the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. And we will continue to do this every year until it is rebuilt.
Harbor, you mean?
Yes!
Brian, I have great news for you. What? It's back.
In POG form?
Pearl Harbor is back.
I don't mean the NFT collection. I already lost my shirt on that.
no, the
I mean
actual
the
Pearl
real
Harbor.
harbor,
Yeah.
which has never again been inhabited by anyone.
No.
Passing around the hat to raise funds to raise the USS Arizona.
Why is it full of cum?
It's so weird when you think about like all of the monuments in DC were in fact funded that way. Like the Lincoln Memorial was people putting dollar bills into a hat for like 75 years before it actually got completed. It's crazy. It's crazy what we used to do before anyone got like taxed.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it.
And we're going back there again, too.
Yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, like the biggest surprise attack we could pull is not do a thing about Pearl Harbor next year. You know, that would be our Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea, AJ, and I reject it.
I reject it out of hand.
What else? What other media besides this? What's left?
AJ, there's so much.
There's
Is there really?
There's a PC game.
Wait, Josh. I remember playing a game. I didn't own this game. I was at my friend's house, and he had a game. I don't know if it was a Medal of Honor game or something, but there was a game where you could play both sides of the Pacific Theater, including a level where you could bomb Pearl Harbor. Did you ever play this game?
Was it a turn-based strategy game? Or?
No, it was a flying game, like Top Gun or something.
Okay, I mean, the game I was looking at, I think, was also a flight simulator, so it could be the same game.
Okay, I was like, I just didn't know if maybe you had played this and knew the name, because I have no idea.
It was just earlier today, I was actually scouring the web to be like, well, what else can we talk about in future years? Because this is not a bit, folks. I mean, it is a bit, but like, for the past 3 years...
one bit we actually can commit to all three of us.
We have continued to review media about Pearl Harbor. The first year we talked about some episodes of the Christian children's radio drama Adventures in Odyssey with Nate Bethea, and one of those episodes was about the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, but it's not the only one.
No.
There are other Odyssey episodes that involve the attack on Pearl Harbor.
But then last year we watched Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor, and that episode was actually released on December 7.
Yeah.
This year, I thought it might be interesting to take a look at Tora, which is a movie that is probably one of the better known films about World War II.
It's certainly the best media that we've covered for Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
True. I mean,
it may be the best total as we continue on through the many years that this will continue to run. We might make you watch the 1970s miniseries Pearl, AJ. Who knows?
And I just want to be very clear that Tora, the film, it is not a rambunctious musical set in a rabbinical school.
No.
Where people have star-crossed lovers, they fall in love with each other. This is in fact
that would be awesome.
That would be really fun.
I need that. I need that.
This is in fact a film that was a co-production with America and Japan, working together to make a pretty accurate account of the day of December 7th, 1941.
Accurate.
One might say didactic.
Oh boy. You ever want to watch guys reading documents? We got a film for you.
So this is a really interesting point in our history, because I think if you were alive in the middle of the 1940s, you would never imagine that such a movie as this would ever be made with cooperation of the Japanese film industry, the Japanese government, even with consultation from the guy who planned the whole attack out. Yeah. That would be like getting Bin Laden to make the 9/11 movie with Oliver Stone. That's what I was
thinking,
Which Oliver Stone, maybe he would do it. That would be kind of fun, actually. Oh, well. R.I.P.
Like Tears in Rain.
R.I.P. Bin Laden. You killed far fewer people than Henry Kissinger. But it has precedent. At the time that Tora comes out, which is 1970, this movie feels a lot older than it is.
It really does, doesn't it?
This is a creaky machine.
Daryl Zanuck produced a movie in 1962 called The Longest Day. The Longest Day is a movie about Normandy, the invasion of Normandy Beach, and it was done with 3 directors, one Brit named Ken Anakin, one American, or Hungarian American, but he was American at that point, Andrew Martin, and one German, Bernhard Wicki, who later did the movie adaptation of Friedrich Dürrenmatt's play The Visit, which we did an episode about.
Wow.
So Anakin directed most of the stuff on the Allied side. And then a little bit, there was some stuff shot in America that was done by the American director, and Bernhard Wicki did all the stuff on the German side, so that you have a German and Allied perspective of June 6th, 1944.
Right, and that can get very tricky when you have two entirely separate productions, because like make it feel like one film.
Right.
Because I mean, even stuff like the Hudsucker Proxy is like the one that leapt to mind. But it's this
Coen
idea
brothers and Sam Raimi.
It's Coen brothers doing most of the film, and then Sam Raimi being like a second unit director. And then it's like it is so funny how it's like it's a Coen brothers movie, and then very briefly it's a Sam Raimi movie, and then it goes back to being a Coen brothers movie. But you don't really feel that in this movie very much. You don't feel that they are two separate productions. They do feel very much of a whole.
Other than the Japanese parts just feel like better. They just pop.
infinitely
they
better.
just have more energy to
Yeah.
them. The Longest Day, this D-Day movie, was released in 2 versions because they really didn't trust that Americans were going to watch a movie where there were foreigners speaking foreign languages in subtitles and everything.
Sure.
So they got the German and French actors to do 2 takes of everything, one where they would do it in English and one where they would do it in German or French.
Oh, wow.
But it turned out the one where they were actually speaking German and French was the more popular one, even in the United States. So that became the version that stuck. And it was a big hit.
Because they actually knew how to speak the language.
Yeah, well, and it's people can read subtitles, it turns out. You know,
Yeah,
and
it's deeply weird how Netflix always pushes the dubbed version of of live action shows. I think it works okay in animation because you can kind of make it work.
Yeah.
But it looks really weird when you're
odd.
trying to like dub over like actual actors.
I mean, yeah, the episode of Kill James Bond that I was just on was a dub of a horrible fucking Italian spy movie.
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
And the it was so good because the main guy, who's supposed to be like the cool James Bond type,
yeah.
all he does is he talks like this.
I remember watching, there's a Sondheim musical called Passion, and it's based off of a lesser known Italian movie called Passion d'Amore. And I remember the first time I found a copy of that movie online, you know, before even like 2010, it was like on YouTube. The whole thing was dubbed, and there were exactly 2 voice actors for the entire movie.
everyone.
Every
No
man
way.
was one guy, and every woman and child was this one lady. Horrible stuff. Horrible stuff.
That's like the good old days of video games.
Yeah.
What is that? What is this? My interstitials?
So then we have this. There's this romanticism towards Japan that kind of always existed. There's a reason that Commodore Perry went there in the first place. There's a reason that Ulysses S. Grant was like a big fan of No theater. And even before the war, Japan is a very popular subject. There was an American journalist named Lafcadio Hearn. Yes, that was his real name. He went
heard of him?
He went to Japan and wrote a bunch of very popular books about Japanese folk tales, daily life in Japan. These were really, really popular books in the United States, mostly unknown now. They're very popular in Japan now, actually.
Oh, wow.
But after the war and during the occupation, and when we get them to get a new constitution and everything, there's this sort of influx of Japan-infused movies. Probably the most famous one out of the bunch is Sayonara, which has noted Japanese-American actor Ricardo Montalban as a kabuki actor. And Marlon Brando. And Marlon Brando also did Tea House of the August Moon, where he played Japanese. He does not play Japanese in Sayonara, but like
he really had quite the gambit. Like he really ran the gambit when it came to playing other races.
that's, you know, it's just what you did at that point in
Yeah,
time.
I guess
it was
so,
the
yeah.
It's just
style at the time.
everybody's got like a thing.
Well,
yeah.
and that's also what makes this movie so interesting, right? Is that this is a movie where all of the Japanese characters are played by Japanese actors.
And not even Japanese American.
No, Japanese.
actors.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so there is a certain authenticity here.
Yeah.
And I think to the point of like, you know, cross-cultural pollination or whatever you want to call it, of course, a big piece of that was the fact that the United States, with the occupation, there was a lot of back and forth going on in terms of the various military bases that the U.S. established, as well as the governmental cooperation in terms of sort of rebuilding Japan after World War II. And so in the wake of all of that cultural overlap, you're starting to get more pop cultural overlap as well.
And another big part of this too is if you listen to Blowback, you've maybe listened to their season about the Korean War. And a big part of how we got the Korean War to get popular support in the United States was cultural.
Right.
It was pushing a cultural basis for this, you know, the anti-communism and everything. But it also meant that we got very friendly with Japan a lot faster.
Right.
Because we started to use Japanese resources in our incursion on the peninsula. So in 1965, then, we actually get our first Japanese-American co-production, at least that I'm aware of, a movie called None But the Brave.
Okay.
This is the only movie directed by Frank Sinatra.
You are looking at a scene from an important new Warner Brothers picture. It has many surprises. Perhaps one of the most interesting is that Frank Sinatra not only stars in the film, but also makes his debut as a director.
In combat, a fighting soldier's taught to hate the enemy. Maybe you have to hate a little before you can pull the trigger when you see a human target in your sights. And it works pretty good when the enemy's a faceless stranger on a battlefield, but what happens when he has a name and a familiar face? When he's somebody you know and respect? Can you still pull the trigger? Now, that's something very few can answer. None but the brave.
He's the star of it too.
Oh, of course he is.
You know, this was his
Does
point.
he get into fights?
Of course he
does.
does.
He get into a brawl like in the Manchurian
That's the
Candidate?
thing. It's like after the Manchurian Candidate, we're seeing Frank Sinatra in quite a few movies. He produced like 10 movies. This is a movie that he also produced. So he did everything here, just like Orson Welles. The movie is... Oh, not good. But None But the Brave has a fantastic screenplay. It is a firmly anti-war picture.
Okay.
Co-produced with Toho in Japan. There's Japanese dialogue, there's English dialogue, there's not even subtitles.
Oh, interesting.
So you as an American, if you don't speak Japanese, you're just not going to understand what the Japanese people are saying. And I don't know.
Conversely, if you're Japanese and you don't speak English.
Yeah, I think there might be quite a bit more English dialogue in that one. But there was another movie released 3 years later called Hell in the Pacific. I think I've brought this up on the podcast before. Very interesting two-hander of a movie, directed by John Borman before he joined our podcast.
and change my name.
Yes.
From John to Josh.
They'll never know it's me. I will no longer be John Borman. I shall be Josh Borman.
Were you hoping that I'd chime in on that one?
I was a little bit.
Thank you, AJ.
That movie stars Lee Marvin and Toshiro Mifune, and that movie also has no subtitles.
Toshiro Mifune.
So this was clearly designed for a Japanese audience and for an English-speaking audience where half of the dialogue is in one language or the other, and then you just straight up aren't supposed to understand the other half, which I think is a really fascinating approach to making a movie.
That was also what happened to me while watching this movie, because on Amazon, some of the subtitles, when they would be speaking, would just be, it would read, speaking Japanese.
No.
And I would say, I know.
Well,
I know they are.
Because this is a subtitled. This is supposed to be a subtitled
I would just
movie.
miss like the beginnings of it mostly.
Yeah, I mean, I grabbed I think it was a Rip the Blu-ray, and there were some lines that went unsubtitled.
Which is
There
actually
were a couple,
actually honestly pretty cool. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of watcher who needs to know what's being said every single minute.
Yeah.
But some of those powerful moments in theater that I've ever seen are the ones where I can't understand what's being spoken on
this
stage.
is a pretty dry movie, and it's mostly concerned with the factual lead up to the attack on Pearl Harbor. So I do think that in the case of Tora Tora Tora, you really do miss something.
Yeah,
Sure.
it seems that most of what goes untranslated, because I don't speak Japanese, is like just introductions,
Yeah,
basically.
there's like a procedural thing. Like I saw that at the beginning when they're transferring the ship captaincy, you know, whoever runs the
they
boat.
like greet each other and then they say something and then they sort of switch positions. At
and
the
then
table.
we're in subtitle mode.
Right.
Yeah. This movie was released, Tora Tora Tora, comes out in 1970. This is the same year as Patton, also by 20th Century Fox, earlier in the year. This is Daryl Zanuck once more. Josh pointed out to me before we got into this, this is also the year that MASH comes out.
Oh, shit. The film or the TV show?
The film.
Okay.
So you can start to see where the ideological lines are being drawn, even though this is not necessarily a pro-war movie or an anti-war movie.
No.
There is certainly, I think, a strain of cultural conservatism.
Yeah, I would say it is romantic, you know, it not obviously in the way that Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay is romantic. Because
Yeah. Very different.
what a goddamn mess.
yeah.
But no, there's a certain way that it sort of valorizes the contributions of the troops, especially on the American side, but also
On the Japanese
side.
yeah.
side.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because I actually think that this movie really goes out of its way to show how much America fucked up in trying to prevent Pearl Harbor.
I agree. I'm talking about the individual soldiers.
Oh,
or the
sure.
seamen, I guess.
Yeah. There was also the
sailors.
A lot of semen.
a lot of semen in this movie is drenched in semen.
Those semen are drenched in the movie.
Yeah.
Patton came out in April. Tora came out in September. The same idea here. It's like, well, this worked so well with Bernhard Vicky. Let's do this again with Japanese directors. So what do? There are 3 years of pre-production that go into this film because they're also like shoring up resources and getting actual military equipment to make this film. For 2 of those years, they have one of the finest directors that Japan has ever produced, that the world has ever produced. Right. Akira Kurosawa himself is working on the script development and starts to work on actual production when they sack him.
He could not follow orders is what it's basically what it boiled down to.
You don't hire Akira Kurosawa to make somebody else's movie.
It's like being like, oh yeah, we'll get Steven Spielberg to take a quick pass at this. Like, no, it's you have to give somebody like that full control.
Yeah. On the American side, we have a director named Richard Fleischer, who's not one of the greats necessarily.
He did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
He worked with Disney. He did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and he did Fantastic Voyage. So he later after this did Soylent Green.
Oh, okay.
So he's kind of a sci-fi guy. He does a Conan sequel. He does Amityville 3D.
He did Amityville 3D. That was the one I wanted to bring up.
On the Japanese side, once they got rid of Kurosawa, there's apparently a little tiny bit of footage that was Kurosawa's, less than a minute, they say.
Sure.
On the Japan side, they got Toshio Masuda, who was a big hit director. You may not be familiar with any of the movies that he made, but he made good money in Japan, directed 82 movies in his lifetime.
Holy shit.
He even did some anime movies.
Oh, cool.
He was able to make that transition. And then we got Kinji Fukusaku, who was famous for his gangster movies, and specifically the Battles Without Honor or Humanity series.
I've never seen that, but that's a great name for a series.
He's known more for like doing this like verite, shaky cam, ultra violent gangster movies of like this. He's almost, I don't think people classify him as a Japanese new wave filmmaker, but
would you classify as those movies as being fancy?
They could be. Yeah, we could watch a couple of Yakuza picks from the 70s if we want to.
Yeah, and then we can maybe tie that into maybe playing some Yakuza games.
Hey. Sure, or we could even join the Yakuza.
I don't think we could.
I have a friend.
You know a guy?
Yeah, he's really nice. Says he's really into poetry.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So you know who else is into poetry is the Emperor of Japan, who I think kind of sounds very annoying in Tora. Because he's just like, they're like, hey, Emperor, should we go to war? And then he recites poetry at them. We're like, well, I don't really know what that means, but I guess we're going to war. There has to be better policy than haiku.
We'll dig deeper into the depiction and also kind of lack of depiction, therefore also depiction of the emperor a little bit later on.
And of our emperor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yes, Emperor Roosevelt.
And lack of that depiction as well.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, he is an off-screen figure. And there might be something more pointed to that than I realize. I don't quite know all of the...
hard to say.
But the main, I think, political thrust towards Tora itself is to correct the record, as it were, on whose fault the intelligence failures are. And namely, I think it's because... First of all, in the late period where we're still involved in the war, like 1944, you get people from the America First Committee, which had basically disbanded at that point, coming up with pamphlets saying that Roosevelt knew that Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked, even in some ways engineered provocations to lead to an attack on Hawaii. This follows along in like the Bircher thing. Again, this stuff doesn't really, much like the USS Arizona, it doesn't hold a lot of water before it sinks. Trapping so many people inside.
That's too soon.
Look, we all know, rebuild. We all know who caused Pearl Harbor, and it was the devil. I read it in a little chick tract that I found lying on the sidewalk.
Okay.
This is a true story.
Wait, there's a chick tract where the devil does Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Please tell me he also blames it on the Jesuits.
I'm pretty. I am pretty sure that it was the devil. I know that it was. There is a chick tract track about Pearl Harbor, and I'm pretty sure they do end up blaming the devil. But I might be conflating it with the chick track about the Titanic, which they also blame the devil for.
The Titanic, that's an old one where it's like the Titanic sank at the same time that we founded the U.S. Federal Reserve.
Right.
And for some reason that's supposed to matter. But Pearl Harbor itself, I think, usually gets blamed on the Navy men, on the men who were in charge in Oahu specifically.
Right.
And this movie is really drawing the line and saying, no, the admiral whose first name is Husband. This guy,
not a joke.
Husband Kimmel.
Oh, Jimmy's grandfather.
Jimmy's grandpa.
Who was so fucking old. This guy was so old. Like, his dad fought in the Civil War.
Whoa, shit.
For the Union, and then for the Confederacy. Motherfucker's a turncoat. That's right.
Oh my God.
That's right. And then he named his son Husband, which has me so incensed.
His dad didn't change it.
No, but people called him Kim, or they sometimes called him Mustafa, because apparently
what's happening?
People were reminded of his name because of Ataturk, because Ataturk's name was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk.
Oh my God!
So they called him they called Husband Kimmel Mustafa.
Hey,
because they thought that was funnier than Husband.
Hey, who's on ABC tonight? Oh, it's Kimmel again. Admiral Admiral
Crichton.
Admiral Husband. Sounds like an anime.
I'm saying
like
Admirable now
anime.
too. Yeah.
Admiral Husband?
Yes.
Admiral Husband. He's got like the Bishy sparkle around
Admiral Husband sounds like it would be the name of a dating sim, doesn't it?
Well,
it's like a dating sim set in the Navy.
It's also a spin-off of the very popular 90s sitcom Major Dad.
You date boats. It's just JPEGs of
Kirk
boats.
Cameron simulator
that you flirt with.
Perfect.
The crossover episode, well, they can't air it again. It was horrible, but it was in 3D, like when Urkel did the time travel thing. I don't know. I'm just riffing.
I'm gonna date the
at this
Enterprise.
point. So this movie,
That's not the Enterprise. That's your flagship. Oh, that's a reference to this movie, and neither of you remembered it because this movie is just so boring.
this people have been trying to like rehabilitate dad movies lately,
Right,
mostly because they thought that somehow Ridley Scott's Napoleon was going to be good. And they're like, actually, yeah, dad movies are great. You want to watch a fucking dad movie? This is the daddest movie.
Okay, so here's a question that I have for both of you.
Please.
Had you watched this movie before we did it for the podcast?
No. Yes, with my dad.
Let's go. I had also watched it because my grandpa had a whole bunch of VHS tapes.
That's a dad twice over.
That's a double dad. That's a dad's dad. That's a square dad right
That's
there.
an Admiral Husband.
Admiral Husband.
Right there. That's an Admiral Husband.
See, my dad never became an admiral. He is a captain, however.
Oh,
well,
wow.
a retired captain, but you know how it is.
Oh, Brian's captain, my captain. There's a bit in well, I actually wrote this down. I wrote this exact phrasing here.
Okay.
I watched this movie and I now understand why men in their 60s read 500-page books about submarines.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm kind of that guy.
Yes,
like,
right. But you're neuroatypical.
I'm normal. And like I have distinct memories, and I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast before or not, but like in high school, I remember reading those fucking Herman Wouk books, War and Remembrance.
Yep.
And those books are like 1,000
They're so
pages
big.
long,
Yeah.
and they're about World War II.
You read them all the way through? Mm-hmm. Jesus.
Good. I think I only read the second one. But
Are they nonfiction or are they fiction?
They're fiction,
Okay.
but they're epic in the same way that this movie is epic, which is to say boring.
Yeah, it's like I forget his name. There's a very famous Chinese novelist. I think he's even still alive, but he's like super fucking old. And he's written all of these long sort of martial arts epics, but they're historically accurate. And he keeps revising the books over the decades just to make them more accurate.
And I think that's kind of the thing about this movie is that both its greatest strengths and its greatest weaknesses are due to that exact approach. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is why Kurosawa could not survive in this environment, because this is a very dry movie.
Yeah, and that
There are
guy's an
things-
auteur. He wants to make creative choices. crisis.
Yeah, I mean, you know, these things they're actually relatively quick cuts for the era. Every shot is pretty static, so every time you get like a conversation, it's a reverse shot. It's, you know, it's two people and you're looking like the wall in the background is always like flat. It is parallel with the frame of the picture. There are no exciting dynamic angles. There are no big stage triangles to be had. Where we do find excitement is in largeness, in having a lot of people on a deck.
Scale.
Or having and having real things, real planes flying around and dropping real bombs.
And a full-size replica of one of the battleships. Now, it was not a complete replica. If you looked at it from the other end, you could see, you know, the supports, but from the other angle, it looked just like the real thing.
Yeah. And I am actually kind of a nerd for seeing old things that look new. So like at the very first scene of the movie where the captains switch captain jobs, I don't know how boats work.
I am relieving you. I am relieved that thing.
Yes. The gold lining like on like the windows and on like the banisters and stuff, you're like, yeah, this is so distinctly something from the 1940s, but it looks brand spanking shiny new. And I think that's really neat.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dissimilar from how cool it is watching Titanic, where you're seeing all of these ornate details replicated as if it were a new thing.
And there's something about it being the physical set, you know, you just don't get the same effect when it's all mats and CGI.
No. And you know where that money comes from? That's that Elmo Williams money.
Yes, Elmo Williams, the co-producer of this, along with Xanax.
Did you just want to say his name?
I really did. It popped up on screen and I was like, Elmo? Elmo did Pearl Harbor?
I was like, is Elmo like a real name or is it a nickname? And it turns out it was this guy's middle name.
Okay.
But it really is Elmo. That was what his parents done give him.
And the other thing that's interesting about Elmo Williams is that he's about 3 feet tall. He's red.
Yes.
Very furry. And
he's a scourge of Sesame Street.
He has the silliest little voice.
Yes. He is 3 years old.
Elmo, I'm a murder. We write it down.
Thanks, Elmo Williams.
You're welcome. Tora.
This movie opens with a title card saying, all the events and characters depicted are true to historical fact. And it's an understatement to say there is an army of characters because there's actually 2 navies of characters and a couple of home offices.
And they're all wearing the same thing. So it is not exactly easy to tell them apart from each other.
You get one shot where the character walks on screen and you get a title card. This is also from The Longest Day. I don't know if The Longest Day is the first movie to do it, but that's what I know. It's like it's the Tora Longest Day thing. Is someone comes on screen and it's like General this guy, Admiral this guy, Emperor this guy. Yeah, if you've played a Metal Gear Solid game, this is what Kojima is having fun with every time he has some fictional guy come on for the first time.
Exactly, yeah. If you've ever played Metal Gear Solid or Death Stranding, you know what this is.
Yes.
It's that, but like for real.
It's because of this textbook design, this textbook idea being applied to movies. It's like, here's a historical guy. We're not going to use exposition to introduce him and add more scenes. He's going to walk on and it's going to say that this is Admiral Husband.
Yes. and this opening shot, we get to see like the Japanese Navy like in all their like glory, and there's so many people. And what I love about it is that it is very silent. It's very still. Yes. Like the shots I think are very interestingly composed. Like you do get like a man in profile, like very, very up close and like stillness for a very long time. And then they all sort of go at ease. And they start gossiping immediately about like why the admiral is like being relieved of duty and like what's going on. And I'm like, I love these gossipy bitches.
Yeah, well, in general, and we mentioned this a moment ago, that like the scenes on this Japanese carrier are some of the best scenes in the movie because
absolutely
these people feel more like real people. Part of that is due to the script, where they are actually sometimes given something to do rather than just spout exposition.
Yeah, right.
But it's also that specific choices are being made, both in terms of acting and direction, that really anchor you in their world and make you feel like you are there with them in space in a way that is not the case every time we cut back to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, we get like people sitting to have dinner, and then there's like a noted like social faux pas because one of their guys isn't there, the guy that they nicknamed Gandhi. Right. And he's just nude in his room.
And so sweaty.
And so sweaty. He's got a little blanket over his head, and he's just like muttering. It's like Salieri witnessing like Mozart for the first time. Like it's just like this plan is perfect.
And it's him like the scene ends and the guy like comes in to check on him and then just sort of slowly backs out of the room. Yeah. And then he's like, Sunday. We'll do it on Sunday.
Yeah. At the beginning of this movie, the Admiral is being replaced. Mm-hmm. So the outgoing guy sits at the table across from the new guy. They switch places. And now it is Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto who is in charge. So he's played by So Yamamura, who I think does a phenomenal job in this movie. Yeah. I think of honestly all of the performances, his is maybe the most memorable, certainly one of the top three.
Yeah. For me, the Tom Cruise fighter pilot is like a little bit higher for me. The Maverick of the Imperial Army.
Japanese Tom Cruise. Yeah.
The Japanese Tom Cruise is a little bit more memorable because he's just like bursting with personality. Yamamoto does an incredible job of being like this stoic pillar that like has to like reckon with the horrors that he's caused.
Yeah. Not quite as theatrical as Mako in the Michael Bay movie.
No. And that's the thing is that now that I've watched this, like watching the Pearl Harbor scenes, it's almost like Michael Bay is like making fun of this movie a little bit. Yeah. Like he's just like, you didn't like, what, let me posit you this. Okay. What if, didn't go with me here.
Okay, posit me that.
The Japanese were just like really evil though.
Right.
Like this movie's like, oh, we're going to like do a fair and balanced thing. And Michael Bay's like, you know what? Nah.
No, they're all just barbarians, right?
Well,
and
Michael Bay's whole thing is like, they're just on the boat and they stand there and they're like, it's going to happen.
Right.
It's going to happen. And then it happens.
We have achieved surprise.
But here you see like the meticulous planning that goes in, the teaching that they do to show the pilots, right? Recognize each ship by name, by silhouette. Like their intel was really strong because as we talked about before, they had a guy in the embassy who was just taking notes on fucking everything. And then also that Kraut family that may have helped, may not have. Yeah.
And the full first half of the movie, because there are basically two acts and there is actually an intermission.
There's an intermission. They let you pee. More intermissions in movies.
Very nice. We love it. The whole first half of this is just planning, basically.
It's like day after day after day, point after point after point. We start in 1940, actually. Like Yamamoto taking over, the tripartite pact being signed. That's the middle of the previous year. And then it jumps ahead as fast as it needs to.
But the way that it sort of portrays all of that is that Japan's military was mostly the army kind of forcing the Navy into this position.
Yeah.
I don't know how historically accurate that is or not, honestly. But it is sort of an interesting thing that they draw that distinction pretty early on, because obviously it is true that Tojo was incredibly fucking aggressive, and they portray him in that way in this movie.
And
as
this
well.
is one of the weird things, because you barely get a glimpse of Tojo, and we just sort of keep going, right? There's a feeling of like that I got with the movie, even though he is there right there at the beginning, of like, does anyone make any decisions?
Yeah.
Does anyone in Japan ever do anything? Or was this just some sort of trick of fate that everyone was like, oh yeah, someone else wants us to do this. We're going to do it, but we don't really want to,
Well, I mean, when you get your commands in poetry,
but
it leaves room for interpretation.
This is also then in many ways how the U.S. side of things is portrayed. This is what this movie is basically doing, and part of the reason that it's so fucking boring is that it is showing sort of institutional paralysis on both sides. Now, again, I don't really know if this is fully accurate or not, based on my understanding of World War II history, which is not the best. The way that Japan was advancing power projection in the South Pacific was pretty aggressive.
Yeah. And they show, they actually make the good case of like why it would be reasonable for Japan to think, we'll attack we'll attack the US next.
Right.
Because they've been beating back the French, the Dutch, because there are all these European powers that exist in the South Pacific that are colonizing these places, that are getting their asses whooped while also having to deal with fighting Hitler on the home front.
Right.
This is all true.
Right.
And so you do get a sense of like, oh yeah, this wasn't just like one insane person's thought. It's just that they really didn't know what they were going to do next, because they were mainly just thinking about how do we get a hold of the Philippines.
Right. And there was also, of course, the hope that because at that time, so much of America's power projection in the Pacific was stationed at Pearl, it would be possible to just go in there, annihilate all the carriers, and basically defeat America in one fell swoop in terms of its ability to
fight
counter
Japan.
Japan in the Philippines.
Yeah, the idea is just like destroy all of the material here, so that way when we go take Guam or the Philippines or the Marianas, there's just no one who's going to push back. Then we're going to have control of all of it, and then the U.S., because of its posture of not wanting to get involved anyway, is not really going to get involved. And then we will have shored up our resources and established very firmly what the borders of the Japanese Empire are.
Right.
Right.
So another big piece of this first act is sort of the diplomatic back and forth.
Yeah.
We get shots inside of the Japanese embassy in DC, and we also get shots inside of the American embassy in Tokyo. So yeah, much of the focus here is on the United States Secretary of State Cordell Hull, who in this movie is played by George McGrady. He's kind of paralyzed in terms of judgment. Like, he's not willing to go one way or the other. And he has a suspicion, but it's not...
There's a lot about like procedure.
Right.
And and FDR, I don't know if FDR was ill around this time. You know, there were points where he would disappear.
Right.
Because, you know, he was suffering from polio. Right. He was very sick, and they didn't want people to know about it.
Right.
And the line that they sort of thread here is that, no, FDR wasn't doing anything. He wasn't engaging in fuckery. But there were people at the White House who might have been.
Yeah.
That's where they kind of settle, is like, oh yeah, there were some guys at the White House who were controlling his access to information, who were being careless with documents, you know, throwing them in the trash can. Getting classified information to places where it doesn't need to go. And we have this very helpful, we have this very helpful cabinet.
The secret I loved that.
They're like, oh, here's everyone who has clearance, and they just open a little cabinet, and it has a list of names. This is one of those things that's just so ridiculous. I kind of assumed it was a real detail, because why would you make up? Why would a successful screenwriter in Hollywood come up with something that stupid?
It's so good. There's this not only is it a cabinet, it's a locked cabinet. So he unlocks this cabinet, he opens it up, and there are just names painted on the wall inside the cabinet.
And it just says ultras,
and one of them
generals
is like
and admirals.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah.
It's like the president, the vice president.
And later they cross him out with chalk.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. We have one of those cabinets at the worst of all possible worlds.
We do, yes.
It's just a list of enemies, really. It's just Phil Lawler's name 58 times.
I want to be very, very clear here, because I think that I don't want to get in on Wad Fam Chalk Pod's territory. They have made enemies with Phil Lawler. I want to be very clear. He's a bad writer. He's a worse writer than Paul McCusker. And that's why Paul McCusker is officially the enemy of the worst of all possible worlds.
Great. Okay. He's also Catholic.
Right.
Well, yeah, that goes without saying.
Oh, yes.
Speaking of Catholics, Adolf Hitler and his allies. As Jack Chick pointed out, of course, the Holocaust was an act of Jesuit genocide.
The Papist plague. Papist purge.
It's our bad. Sorry, guys.
Yep.
I do want to say, in that scene that has the little cabinet, there is something that is very detailed that I wouldn't doubt at all is depicted exactly as was in reality, which is the code breaking device, which is a fun little, the way that they describe computing is like, oh, and it swirls around in that box a little bit before it comes out the other side, and they have a little teletype in the room that types everything out in Hepburn, not in Japanese characters, but in like Hepburn.
In Audrey, yeah.
It's a
Catherine,
form.
actually.
It's a form of transliteration into our alphabet. AJ,
Cleopatra was
Hepburn. The word that I said.
So at Pearl Harbor, they are doing their best to do this code breaking, right? To decode these cables that are coming through.
they're doing beyond their best. They're apparently getting these codes before the Japanese embassy is getting them.
Yeah.
We're doing fine at actually interpreting all of this information. It's just not getting anywhere it's supposed to.
And this is, again, it's one of these things where...
This happened with 9/11 as well.
Yes.
I didn't really know a lot about the lead up to Pearl Harbor. And actually, the thing I learned most from this movie is what happened afterwards, too, a little bit. Because I thought that most of the pilots had kamikazed, in actual Pearl Harbor.
And that's something that Michael Bay, they didn't show them suicide bombing in the Michael Bay movie, but they did show them taking part in the preparatory action of the kamikaze
with
pilots.
the sake shot and the bandana thing.
And kamikaze was a very specific thing that only came about in the later years of the war because Japan was getting its ass kicked.
Right.
So it was something that was born out of desperation of this dying empire to be like, oh yeah, we're just going to crash the entire fucking plane into the boats because that's going to cause a shock to morale.
Right. Okay. Because that's interesting because there are no kamikaze things in Pearl Harbor in this movie.
No, they just drop bombs. Yeah.
Well, and there's one guy who does end up crashing into a hangar, but that's
because
sort
his
of
plane was going down.
And that's a semi-controlled act of desperation, not an intentional act. These cables coming through are being interpreted by the people at Pearl Harbor. They are being translated.
Is this even Pearl Harbor or is this Washington?
Oh, it might be. I'm not sure.
There's a lot of jumping around.
What is clear, though...
There probably was a title card once. I wish that, every time someone came on, we'd see the title card again, Which is what Kojima does.
Yes.
No, have them wear name tags.
Yeah. You could. They're in the military.
Yeah, right there. Come on.
Put the badges on.
Admiral Husband is such a Kojima name, too. That's what Death Stranding 2 is all about. One was all about fatherhood. The next one's about marriage.
Right.
So it's just Admiral Husband,
it's
man.
Admiral Husband. You know who's got some money that they could probably throw at that? Elmo Williams.
Elmo Williams.
He's too small.
He doesn't have any money. He's a dependent.
He doesn't even have pockets.
Yeah. I do want to mention something.
He wears coats.
Something that I don't think is very great in this movie is the music.
Yeah.
And this is another
Weirdly.
thing. We have covered, I think, 2 movies now with music written by this composer. This is Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah,
who did Star Trek, who did Alien.
Yeah. And his score for Alien is one of the best movie scores ever written.
And at this point, I think he's still kind of just a TV guy, and this feels like a score written for TV. It feels like it's written fast.
It's incidental music, isn't it? It's not
the Japanese stuff feels stereotypical, not in an offensive way.
No, just not in an easy way.
Oh yeah, here's kind of a Japanese sound.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the band on the deck of the ship is playing, I'm assuming, contemporary Japanese army songs or Navy songs. Yeah. And it doesn't sound the same way as Goldsmith's music.
I really do love the juxtaposition of the 2 bands too, that the Navy's the same all over the world. It's,
everybody's got a band.
Everybody's got a band,
flag.
and they got everybody's got a flag, and they got to have the band play and then raise the flag. It is very striking to see the 2 militaries portrayed as both alike in dignity.
Yeah.
In a way that I found actually quite shocking.
Especially in 1970.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is even though there are some agendas here, it's hard to say if this is a movie that's really just trying to thread the needle.
Yeah.
Right. That's really just trying to say, no, every war has its 2 sides, and they're all just people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Not one necessarily worse than the other when you're talking about the actual battles being fought.
And I have a theory as to why the Japanese side of the story is more effective, which we'll get into a little bit later. But the American side is just not very engaging because you don't really have a protagonist in the same way.
Well, there's no agency. Right?
Yeah.
On the Japanese side, they're all engaging in something, and the American side is they're all just kind of sitting around, which is what the reality was.
Which is what was happening. But how do you that's sort of the big issue in general is how do you dramatize inaction?
Yeah.
Right.
And probably the Coen brothers are the only people who figured it out with Burn After Reading.
Sure.
Right. But that movie is filled with people constantly trying to do things and failing to do things.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and this is just to do with the way that this movie is written.
Yeah.
They're not willing to inject anything that was less than 100% factual.
Yeah.
I think a potential solve here would be to have a character or 2 who maybe wouldn't even be a real person, who would be trying to send stuff up the chain over and over and over again and getting defeated by the bureaucracy at every turn. Now, this sort of does happen here with a few of the different characters. At one point, they get something that looks like it might be pointing to an attack on November 30th, exactly 1 week before the real attack happened.
Yeah.
And so they put the whole base on alert.
Yep.
And nothing happens.
Really missed opportunity to do a needle drop of 1 week by the Bare Naked Ladies on December 7th.
Yeah, the song that existed in 1970.
No, I'm just saying we can re-edit.
And 1941 also.
Yes.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Don't you understand? I'm crazy. 5 years since you laughed at me. Say get back together, come back and see me.
I've always loved the Andrews sisters version of All Star. I just always they're.
Hey now,
You can't. I can't do that. That's the harmonies. We can't do those harmonies. They're very difficult.
They're very tight.
What's that?
I have no idea. I don't know what that was. I don't know what that was.
AJ is having a panic attack right now. Again, it's just such a great loss for our country that it still affects us all so emotionally. I really like the idea. I kind of want to get us. We will rebuild. We have so many Europeans who listen to this show. I really want them to think that this is a day that people actually think about, as opposed to a thing that no one ever acknowledges. Like I knew it because like my grandpa served in Waikiki like right after.
Yeah, as a kid, I went to church with a guy who was a member of the Navy Seabees. I interviewed him about it at one point.
And my grandpa fought in the Korean War by serving at a station in Iceland.
That's so awesome.
That's the literal opposite side of the globe.
He refueled planes, and then he actually got his service cut short because he got put into a game show where they brought him home from the war to be reunited with my grandma on national
this feels
television.
like you're setting up some kind of a bit that I cannot see the ending to, but this is real.
This is a true story.
Was this on like To Tell the Truth or something? Do you know what the show was?
I believe it was Truth and Consequences.
Truth and Consequences?
Yeah.
Truth or Consequences? Yeah.
Truth or Consequences is the name of a town in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Famously. You know what it's famous for? Truth or Consequences?
It's baths.
Jiggity China, the Chinese chicken. You have a drumstick and your brain stops sticking. Watch your next files with no lights on, with all liaison. I hope the Smoky Man's in this one like Harrison Ford. I'm getting frantic.
What does that have to do with Truth or Consequences?
Either the game show or the town.
I was just doing the callback.
Oh, okay.
Is this still part of the Henry Kissinger eulogy?
No, those are lyrics to 1 week by Bare Naked Ladies, Brian.
Well, yeah.
So Truth or Consequences, according to your bit, is famous for the 1940s version of 1 week by the Bare Naked Ladies.
Yeah.
On Truth or Consequences.
Yes.
So, we hang out a little bit with the Prime Minister of Japan, Konoe, spelled Konoye in this one, Konoye West.
Oh boy.
He's a prince, which he's labeled as like Prince, Prime Minister.
Prince,
and I didn't know if that was like, like if you look in Imperial Russia and how everyone is named Prince whatever and it doesn't fucking mean anything.
Sure.
No, he was a prince. He was part of the actual Japanese nobility, which was then outside of the emperor's immediate family, abolished in the 1947 Constitution.
Oh, okay. Sure, yeah, that makes sense.
But and also he killed himself in 1945 because he was going to go up for some war crimes trials.
Yeah.
And which the war crime stuff in Japan is also very darkly like farcical, very funny because like there's so many Americans involved who are like pro-emperor, and then like there's another cadre of people who are anti-emperor, and so everyone is like trying to race to get to who gets the war crimes trials first, and the emperor comes out of it unscathed. Right. He remains the emperor until he dies in 1989. The entire Showa period goes all the way until then.
But he has to admit that he's not derived from divinity, right? Like,
yeah, we made him read some embarrassing stuff or whatever on the radio.
Yeah.
We made him do a king's speech in reverse, but
it's just Colin.
You have to stutter.
It's just Colin Firth getting progressively worse at public speaking.
Well, we've talked a fair bit at this point about sort of what things look like on the U.S. side, right?
Yeah.
It's just this series of ongoing near misses. Meanwhile, the portrayal on the Japanese side of things is like they're getting closer and closer to the plan actually congealing and coming to fruition.
Yeah,
right?
we're getting there to November. I brought this up with Michael Bay's movie where they like have a tearaway calendar and it's like December 7th.
Yeah.
Which in Japan, it was December 8th when they made the attack. So here we have subtitles that say December 7th, but they're actually saying December 8th in Japanese.
Oh, cool. That's fun.
And in the same way that whenever someone's saying like December 7th in English, it's getting translated the other way in Japan, just to keep it clear, because that's how it's logged in the history of both of our countries.
Yeah.
And they do, my favorite scene in this movie, there is this little acknowledgement of the difficulties of working along the international date line. This very like Shakespearean little scene with these two ship's cooks.
This was cut for the theatrical release,
This was
right?
cut for the American theatrical release. And this and the scene at the palace are... It's about 2 minutes of material that are in the Japanese release that weren't in the initial American
And they're
release.
the two best scenes in the whole movie.
Absolute best scenes.
By far.
This one is ridiculously funny.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Where it's just it really is the classic like gravedigger bit where you have one gravedigger who's dumber than the other one, and the first one's trying to explain the joke that he just told.
Like they're both dumb, but like one of them thinks that he's really smart.
One is the smart dumb guy.
Right.
And then he takes a big drink of the boiling soup from his ladle and then almost dies.
It's some incredible physical comedy.
Yeah, and I didn't look it up. I wondered if maybe these guys were like recognizable names or something like that, because they are so funny.
But did they come back in the movie at all? I don't know.
That's their one scene.
It's just these
One
two
and done.
cooks in the kitchen. One of them is trying his absolute best to explain how the international date line works, and the other guy just cannot understand it.
It's lovely.
It's like, then we can't shoot them if we're on one side and they're on the
It's
other.
like we can't shoot them with yesterday's
they're in
ammunition
yesterday.
or whatever.
We also get like this really, I think, lovely like shot of the ship, which is just Top Gun. They have like the plane launching
the
at
sun.
dawn.
Yeah.
And the sun in the background.
It's the golden hour shot from the beginning of Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, and it's this guy Genda who is basically the maverick of the Imperial Army, who is just bursting with charisma.
Yeah.
Like this guy, like has a movie star face.
Yeah, and a movie star just sensibility. Like he is so magnetic.
The thing is that like a lot of the characters you sort of lose track of because there just are so many people.
Yeah.
But anytime Genda's on screen, you're like, there's fucking Genda.
Well, it also helps that he gets a distinctive costume piece.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
a point
yeah.
at which he's given a Rising Sun bandana, which he puts around his forehead.
Right.
And so from then on, he's also identifiable that way.
There are these extensive plans and war games being done by Japan. They're talking about how they're developing these sort of aerial torpedoes, right? Because the ships in Pearl Harbor are not in deep water. So you can't just drop your usual sort of bomb. It has to be a shallow water attack. And so it's very, very careful, very precision stuff. We see them running drills with flashcards of like, this is the Arizona, this is the Oklahoma.
Yeah. And then there's a really wonderful moment there too, where they pull up a card and it's like, which one is this? And one guy fucks it up. And it's like, that's not one of their ships. That's our capital ship, you dumb bitch. And everybody's
giving each other shit.
That was the one.
Yeah.
And it shows like this was a meticulously laid out thing. It was a very, very delicate operation, and one that they don't actually follow through on all the plans you find at the end.
Unlike in the parallel scenes on the US side, these scenes are both effective in terms of setting up the stakes, and they're effective as scenes in a movie. They have characters and they have actual grounding to them.
Yeah,
and
it feels sort of like when you're on Yavin 4 in the first Star Wars
that's
movie,
a great,
right?
yeah,
The guys are all
it
gathered
feels like the
around and they're
rebels,
looking at the wireframes and they're all getting their helmets on, and
there were numerous points at which this movie reminded me of Star Wars.
And there's something also about like Pearl in Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor that all the Japanese are just like killing machines. Like they just get in the ship, they
do everything wordlessly.
Wordlessly, and it's done. But we see them like having fun and goofing off and giving each other shit, and it's like, they were just soldiers, like we were.
This was not happening with the kamikaze units later on. It was misery and death and alcohol.
But that's interesting too, right? That it's capturing what the tone was, because there's also something very interesting happening here, where you are sort of finding yourself sympathizing with the grunts, right? These lower level aviators.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you also have the admiral, right? Yamamoto.
Yeah.
And he is he is on a completely different level. He is constantly worrying. Like you can see the anxiety on his face because he knows and he has an understanding that if this doesn't work out, it's going to be very, very bad.
He knows that the U.S. is too big and too powerful and won't give up if it gets involved in the war. He says, you know, we'd have to take over Washington, D.C.
Yeah, we have to do peace negotiations in the White House.
It wouldn't even be enough to like bomb out L.A. and San Francisco, which would also be like, that's such a moonshot anyway.
Right.
He realizes that there's a problem here. And there's a point where he goes to meet with Emperor Hirohito.
Yes.
Right. And it's this totally purely ceremonial thing. And you have the prime minister walking him through there. And the prime minister, that actor's physicality is really fun. They play a lot with his silhouette. They play a lot with the soldiers marching outside. This is the other thing that initially only played in Japan.
This is also one of the few scenes in this movie that I would say feels truly artistic in terms of its sensibility, the framing, the movement.
One other one, but it's very short, and we'll get to it when we hit Pearl Harbor Day specifically.
So all the dialogue in this scene is just like a speech given by the PM. And this PM is telling him, okay, yeah, this is what's going to happen. All of this is a formality. You know, we're not really calling the shots. The emperor isn't really calling the shots. He's a figurehead. And this is part of the reason why I think this was a Japan only scene is because, like I said, this guy's still the emperor in 1970.
Right.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So we're playing with revision here. This is not true. This is just not true for Hirohito. He was involved. He was aggressive.
Right.
He was calling shots when he felt that he had the expertise necessary.
Famously.
He was totally there in this process. It's just that as far as like Axis leaders go, he got lucky might not be the right word because there was certainly strategy on the part of those who defeated Japan. But like, you know, Mussolini gets taken down by Italians.
Right.
Yeah, dragged through the street famously.
Hitler gets killed by a German.
An Austrian, actually.
Well,
he's from Austria.
Hitler defined himself so firmly with the Nazi project that he takes himself out when it collapses.
Right.
Tojo gets executed.
Right.
This prime minister kills himself because he's going to be up for trial and he doesn't want to deal with it. And the emperor remains the emperor until 1989.
Yeah.
Dies comfortably in his bed.
I think there's something
like someone else, perhaps,
that
we know
who
lived to be 100 years old and is no more.
AJ Diddy.
Yeah.
Rip to a real one.
Oh no!
It's interesting, right? Because there were certain concessions that were made as part of the process of disarming Japan and reconstruction and stuff like that.
Yeah, we made it into kind of one of our colonies, but not really. But kind of, but not really.
I think what's interesting here is the question of like, what is a figurehead and what does a figurehead mean to people, you know?
Yeah.
And if you take a person and you strip them of all of their actual power and just leave them as sort of a formal figurehead, what does that leave behind? And there's an interesting tension in this scene too, because you never actually see the emperor. You only see the throne.
And it seems like the implication of this scene, I was trying to look up what the history of this might have been referencing, and I couldn't find anything. But it seems like this meeting with the emperor is exactly what the scene ends us with, which is that Yamamoto walks into an empty room with a bare throne. The emperor is not there, and I don't think he's going to be there. I think it's just literally like it's an on-paper meeting because that's the formality. That is the ritual. The prime minister can't go inside for this kind of meeting. In the same way that in England, they do the same thing where the PM goes to the Queen every single week and the Queen can offer certain advice, but like doesn't actually do anything. Or the King now.
The Queen definitely can't offer advice anymore.
She and Henry Kissinger are
That's
both
me. I'm the Queen.
reenacting scenes from Mrs. Doubtfire in Hell together. So, so like, but you know, the King can't, he can theoretically not sign a law, but he always does, right? Unless he's going to be the Charles III of the Mike Bartlett play. And but the emperor really wasn't this nominal role, right? The Meiji Restoration through World War II is probably the only time the emperor really was the sole power. Because before the U.S., before Admiral Perry came to Japan, the emperor was not the guy at the top. It was shoguns. It was the shoguns. Yeah. And so it's like they're again, this is part of the whole like, yes, he wasn't really involved or something like that. But it still is trying to do this. And I think part of the most interesting way that you can do propaganda, and the most effective way, which is that it's still wrong. Right. It's like it's still like, oh, well, the emperor was shirking his duties then. Right. Rather than being actively involved in doing something bad.
Oh, yeah. No, they misinterpreted the poem.
Yeah.
He didn't
Really got
want
that poem.
war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I think at one point, like he recites the poem and he's like, oh, so the emperor doesn't want war. And he's like, well, that's kind of what it sounds like, I guess.
But this is, I mean, it really does need to be pointed up here.
Yeah.
Just how fucking wild this is.
This scene is like a little movie of its own, honestly.
Yeah.
It's so good.
But it's also, yes, so inaccurate, right?
Yeah.
The fact that the Imperial Japanese government was no less genocidal, and it did come from the top.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's funny when you talk about the colonization and the presence of American bases. You can watch the movie Tea House of the August Moon if you want to see a little bit more of that, specifically with Okinawa and its bases, and also Marlon Brando plays Japanese.
Every time.
Oh, well.
There's a lovely scene where they're practicing flying the planes through Japan in a place that kind of looks like Pearl Harbor.
They've like staged an island off of Japan to have the markers and the distances that they need to recreate Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, and they fly it through, and all the geisha women are like leaning out the window, going, "Oh,
yeah.
hey, it's the soldiers!" And then they fly over this grumpy old man fishing, and he says, "Navy planes attract geisha girls, but frighten the fish."
It's so good. Like, it's weird little moments like this where it's like, this points to a much more fun movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they weren't willing to have more moments like this. The only times you get moments like this are on the Japanese side.
Yeah, there's no like day in the life Americana
there's,
unless it's like a wife giving her admiral husband a hot dog.
Well, there are moments where we're like at the bar. We're at the little tiki bar with all the Navy guys, and they're like, "Oh, you got radar dish duty." Speaking of radar dish,
Oh boy,
there is another really funny.
Fucking scenes. There's
This
like
is
three of these
There's
scenes.
three of these
God, there's
scenes.
so
They
many.
all are on top of a hill, and so the wind is blowing, and so they had to ADR the whole scene. And I think in a couple cases, it might not even be the regular actor who was supposed to be.
It's so good.
It's not the
Doesn't
same
sound like
actor
it.
matching his voice, and the acting is so fucking bad.
It sounds like something out of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Yeah, here's a clip.
Well, it's not an ideal radar site, but at least we've got a permit. Let's get the other mobile units working.
That's easier said than done.
What do you mean?
Well, first we have to get all 6 units adjusted.
Take it easy, Murph. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Just I can't. It's such a like stereotype, and again, it feels like this is like 20 years older than it is. This does not feel like a movie from 1970.
yeah, this is where you can really feel the creaks.
Yeah, and it's just weird because like everything else is so robotic, but these deliveries are like a little too animated and just like, I don't know, very community theater or something. I don't know. They do a couple of scenes, again, like the bar, where they're kind of giving some guy shit, or there's two guys who are going to be like moved from where they are, and they're like, oh, it's because we win too many poker games. But there's like no joke there. But there's like, there could be.
No, that just seems like a historical fact. Like these guys were moved because they won too many.
And then
hands in
there's
poker.
the one pointed scene where they're like, oh yeah, the radar dish. We can't put it on this mountain because of the damn national parks.
That's so
and those,
wild.
What a
those
weird
liberals,
fucking scene.
Those liberals trying to save the animals. It's like, yeah, it's Hawaii. It's a very delicate ecosystem.
It's a super. There is a volcano.
It's a tiny archipelago.
Lost is literally going to be filmed 20 feet from where you are currently standing in like 40 years.
Just
30 years.
Ridiculous. It's very silly, very stupid. And there's no joke in there. There's one joke scene that we get on the American side that happens when the actual invasion takes place. So I won't talk about that until the second half.
We're about to get to our intermission.
Yeah.
Hey, remember the calendar thing?
Yeah.
Well, we get the ominous shot of the calendar that says December 7th.
I like that the
In
guy,
DC, where it's actually December 7th.
I do like the guy looking at it like a little bit shocked. I'm like, this doesn't mean anything to you.
Wait,
It's just December 7th. It's just a day, my bro. But when we come back from our break, we will talk about that day, bro, that will live in infamy.
This week's episode is brought to you by The Sound of Settling. Bappa.
We're back.
Oh.
You said you had a way to take us back in. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is now the morning
Oh.
of December 7th, 1941.
Snake?
The sun has risen.
Snake?
From the land of the rising sun comes a...
Snake!
Comes a... Okay, from the land of the rising sun.
Metal Gear.
Okay, over the international.
Sir, I think your holodeck is ringing. I think your comm is ringing, sir.
I think your cock is. Fucking shut up, dick. You haven't played these games. You don't know what the calls are about.
Are you going to, sir? I think.
No. You were calling me on the phone. What were you calling me about, AJ?
It wasn't me.
Press select.
Don't yell at me. Yell at the console.
What are you calling me about, AJ?
Colonel.
Snake! It's December 7th, 1941!
Is that Elmo Williams?
It's me, Elmo Williams!
Today it's our episode is brought to you by the number December 7th.
The number December 7th.
I'm all hopped up on goofballs like Elon Musk at that public forum he was just at. You see him? His head was just like cranking left and right the whole
was
time.
So good. I was like, I could not believe what I was seeing.
He kept dropping like more lines too, where he was like, "Ask the world."
Ask the world.
No, he didn't say the world. The world would be normal. He said, "Ask the Earth."
Ask the Earth.
Hey, you know what? If you are an actress somewhere on Earth, we will pay you to be in this show.
Yeah.
Elon Musk's zombie sadistic nurse musical.
So we have reached a point now, right, where American intelligence thinks this thing is going to happen on November 30th.
Right.
And November 30th has come and gone.
It has come and gone. It is December 7th. It's been 1 week since you looked at me,
right,
dropped your hands to the side and said, "You're crazy."
Well, and they have been saying you're crazy. And that's the thing, right, is they have raised the alert a couple times now. They've put the base on full alert a couple times.
Yeah, the people are mad about it.
And people are, because it's kind of annoying, right? It's like a Boy Who Cried Wolf kind of situation, yeah?
Yeah. Everyone has to like be at attention and be on guard all the time, and then it's exhausting.
Right.
And then, it's it just seems like
In
mismanagement.
peacetime.
Yeah, in peacetime.
Right.
It seems like mismanagement from the top down. And, December 7th itself opens, I think, in one of the only other artistic shots in this film, which is it is of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and all of the cherry blossom trees are dead and bare.
Yeah.
And there's just
the cherry blossoms, which didn't get planted until later. Because again, we're just filming at the real location.
Right,
in 1970.
It is, I will say, it was wild to see the Capitol building just like
no
a
one's
thing
around.
that you could walk up to.
Yeah. No fences.
Yeah. People forget how much of that was post 9/11, that all those security
entirely
barriers
post
went up.
9/11. Yeah, it's just like, I remember, how many years it was you could not go and do a tour of the White House.
Yeah.
You could go and see it from across the street.
That's
through
what I did.
2 fences.
That's what I did when I went on my DC trip, was to look. It was like, oh, wow, well, I guess that sure is a house.
I did take the White House tour, and I can't remember if it was when I went to DC in high school or in college, but I did see the East Wing.
That's not even the good wing. That's not the one everyone wants to see from the TV show.
That's not where Aaron's doing lines. You have to go to the other.
That's where the president is. No, I didn't get to see the Oval Office. I think I did get to see the Lincoln bedroom, though. That's in the East Wing, right?
This is a fun fact about Abraham Lincoln's hat. It is also an Ong's hat because he did come in it.
Oh. Yeah. Did you guys read that like children's book that's about Abraham Lincoln's hat and how he has all of his letters in his hat, and then he like loses his hat and all the letters fly out?
Oh, that sounds very whimsical.
That does sound very whimsical, but they wouldn't go anywhere because they're all stuck together.
Right.
Well, you take liberties sometimes, right? Like the story of Abraham Lincoln renting that library book. That didn't actually happen.
Or George Washington with the cherry tree.
Yeah. So, it's like, grown-ups, can handle the cum thing. The kids, not so much. You don't know what the kids know about the cum.
Well, look, and this movie also takes a lot of liberties, let's say, with history every once in a while.
Such as?
Well, the very final shot of the film, which we will get to.
AJ's one of those guys who's really mad on IMDb about the fact
you're
that
posting the goofs on the IMDb trivia.
You can very clearly see that the Japanese planes are not Mitsubishi.
Oh my God. The corrections
is so long. It's the longest goofs.
It's every dad in America has flocked to IMDb and chosen this movie.
It's like a guy watched Fargo and he's like, that title card is not right. I went and checked out the newspapers in Brainerd and they'd mention nothing of this. No police officer was killed on this day.
The big goof that I caught.
The goof troop, really.
So at the end of this film, there is a quote that is attributed to Yamamoto that I think is the one that you know if you know Pearl Harbor, right?
Yes. We awakened the sleeping giant or the sleeping dragon or whatever.
Let me see.
And that quote that he gives, that is the finale of this film,
yes,
is something that he basically said. And then he reaffirmed in a letter like 6 years later, like when the war was done.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's something that is more or less what he did in fact say after they attacked Pearl Harbor.
Right. The exact quote is awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with terrible resolve.
Yeah.
And there is no like proof that he said it, except this confirmation 6 years later that he said it.
It's not confirmation. He wrote this down 6 years later, but he said something very similar at the time that we do have.
Right. But he refined it over time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like he made it into like more of a poetic statement, you know.
It's like begun the Clone Wars have. Yoda didn't actually say that. That was in a telegram that he sent a little bit later to Obi-Wan when he was actually heading out into his exile onto Dagobah.
But it worked better in the movie to have him say it.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing I think that this film could have used more of is perhaps that artistic refinement.
Well, that's one opinion. But let me tell you a few of the things that Tora got wrong.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Let me get my little bell.
At the beginning of the launch sequence, Admiral Nagumo, Lieutenant Commander Ganda, and some other officers exit the bridge to the platform, allowing them to look down on the deck of the Akagi, where deck crew are spotting the aircraft for launch. The door to the bridge, which is supposed to be steel plate, is obviously made of a much lighter material.
Ding!
Here's another one.
Oh, no.
Here's another one. When Admiral Kimmel arrives... Okay, here we go.
When husband Kimmel,
the man himself.
Admiral Husband Mustafa Kimmel
arrives at headquarters during the attack. Two officers exit the building and casually walk away. No one would have been walking casually that morning.
That one's interesting because like they make a very specific point about how as the attack is underway, no one has any idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? There's a bunch of planes overhead that are dropping bombs all of a sudden. So yeah, people are like, what just? Oh, I just heard a noise.
Right.
They talk about writing up the guy that flies directly over them.
Yeah, there's a Japanese guy who like buzzes the tower basically.
Yeah, you have this moment that feels very pointed and feels like it's actually drawing some sort of larger attention, which is everyone's just standing at attention looking at the flag and playing the national anthem.
Yeah.
And the planes are right there and they just keep standing and saluting.
And they start playing the national anthem faster.
It's so funny.
It's really funny.
There are two moments of like, besides the chef scene, there are two moments of brilliant comedy in this second part. And the first one is when a plane flies overhead and it's like, oh, you better get that guy's number, Jensen.
Right.
And then there's just an explosion as a bomb drops.
And they're like, what the fuck?
They're like, what the fuck is happening? Because again, this felt very true to me. This felt true to life, which is when these catastrophes happen, not everyone is going to acknowledge that they're happening at the same time. And not everyone's going to know what to do at the same time.
And then also you go into overdrive and you start to think that there's something happening that isn't happening. Instead, you can hear that all the time of people who are like, oh, I heard gunshots, and like no one fired a gun or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most arresting sequences in the movie, where it's just like the disaster is coming and people don't even realize it's a disaster as it is occurring.
Yeah.
But this does have a scene that I think has a little bit of actual comedy in it. It got a slight chuckle out of me, which is that as these planes are approaching Hawaii, they intercept a student aircraft pilot.
Oh yeah,
in a big yellow crop
this like
duster.
teenager trying to learn how to drive a Cessna.
It's Davey, old Davey.
And he's like, okay, I'm doing the turn. She's like, oh yeah, the weather's a little rough. We're a little bumpy. Keep that keep the nose from going down. And then all of these planes show up, and she's just like, I'm going to take over now, Davey. And then just does like a barrel roll all the way down.
That's there's three good bits in
And that
this.
was one of those things where it's like, that's such an unusual scene
that would be very out of
happened.
place in such a scrupulous movie.
Yeah,
right?
that this must have actually happened, and it did. That is a true thing. It was this one woman, Cornelia Fort, who weirdly
like Cornelia
enough,
Fortnite.
What?
why?
No, Josh, it's been 1 week since you looked at me.
Yeah.
Not 2.
Yeah. Why is it more like that, Josh?
Okay, so in the video game Fortnite, you are charged with building a fort, right?
Sure.
And about half the gameplay is during the day, and half the gameplay is during the night. So
you think that's why it's called Fortnite? Because because it has a day-night cycle, and they just don't want you to think about the day part.
Sometimes you are building the fort at night.
Fort day.
And so in this movie,
But
it's
you
happening.
build the fort at any point in time.
anytime.
But there's a day-night cycle, and in this movie, Cornelia.
It's not fort day-night.
Cornelia.
It means 2 weeks, Josh, and that's how long it takes to play a single game of Fortnite is 2 weeks.
Camellia
14
Fort,
days.
or whatever the fuck her name is.
Oh my God, yes, that is her name.
Is flying at daybreak, so it's the end of the night cycle in a game like Fortnite, and so in that regard, she could be considered Cornelia Fortnite.
I don't think she could.
I think she could.
No, because her name's Cornelia Fort,
Right.
and it's day.
More like Cornelia Fat. Am I right?
So here's the thing. She is notable in history for two things. One is this moment, where she was the first American to encounter the Japanese planes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
The second moment was she went and joined up the Air Force after this. Or maybe she was flying planes. You know, there are different branches you can fly planes, and I think she was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
She became the first female pilot to die in active duty.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, she died in Texas. She didn't get killed by the enemy. She collided into another plane.
Oh, no.
In midair over Texas, yeah.
Oh, God.
Like a year and a half later or something like that, yeah.
Was Davey flying the other plane?
Yes, actually.
Yeah, I couldn't find any notes on whoever the student flyer
That's the real
was.
sick irony of it all.
Like, that's interesting. That could, that was a kid then. He could still be alive.
True.
How weird is that?
That's wild.
Oh, man, that is
Makes me
super
feel
weird.
bad that we've been making all these mean jokes about Pearl Harbor.
More like Pearl Fartbur.
It's not like that. It's not like that. No.
Sorry.
Pearl Fartbur sounds like someone who won a lot of awards as a playwright in the 70s and was like produced all the time. He still gets done in acting classes, but you're like, there's no meat on this bone,
It's like, It's like, I don't know how Pearl Fartbur won 12 Tony Awards.
And the Pulitzer. Two Pulitzers. Pearl Fartbur is also someone you can romance an admiral husband.
Just get into acting class. God damn it, we're doing another fucking scene from a Fartbur play. Come on.
Jesus. Like, we get it. Young men are full of rage sometimes.
Marlon Brando.
We get it. Heroin was cool.
No,
You
Marlon
did
Brando-
David Rabe last month. You can't do that all the time. You have to do some Carol Fartbur in between.
Carol? Her name's Carol now?
Why
Sure,
does it
what
say
did we
this
say?
character is Japanese, but it must be played by a white man?
Her adaptation of Tea House of the August Moon, setting it as a realist masterpiece, was really one of the first plays to depict bipolar disorder in such a horrifically inaccurate way.
Yeah.
But it was important. It was important for that kind of representation because Next to Normal wasn't going to happen for another 40 years.
I think
more
we
like
have
Fartby years.
It is more like that. I think that we have successfully
Fortnite.
constructed our least accessible episode of all time.
Or the most.
Maybe. We'll see.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
This is a fact that I did not know about.
It's in Hawaii.
About the. And then we will rebuild it. The thing I didn't know was that there was actually a submarine that the Japanese had sent to do sort of reconnaissance.
that we sunk beforehand.
That we had sunk beforehand, and that this call had gone out for 30 minutes beforehand. But what it actually really taught me was that submarines are just sneaky little guys.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool scene, actually, where there's a cruiser out there that intercepts a Japanese submarine.
Yeah.
They send some depth charges, they blow it up, and then they radio it in. And this is before the planes arrived.
Yeah.
And then at the base, everyone's just like, yeah, the captain of that ship is a fucking kid. What does he know?
Yeah, it's his first time out.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
looks
yeah.
like a Pete Davidson without any tattoos.
Yes, he
Well,
does.
it says something. It's like, yeah, you drop a depth charge, you see the depth charge go off. What does that mean, right?
Right.
Your indication that there's a submarine is just a little bit of wake for where the fucking periscope is.
Do you know for sure that you even saw a periscope?
Yeah.
Like, all you did
Yeah.
was drop depth charges. You don't have a confirmed kill.
I mean, in this film, you can very clearly see it's the submarine
Well, of course you can, because it's a movie.
But you just hear, you can kind of hear the submarine under the water going, like it is such a, like, there's a big ship next to it.
Yeah.
There's another big ship next to it, and then there's just a little guy just gliding around.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a submarine do that before, like be that small.
Yeah. It shows again the absolute failure of communication because
Yes, right.
now we have a real incursion has happened and the intel is being ignored because the guy's young.
Yeah.
right? So it still puts some blame back on the guys back at Pearl Harbor, right? This is a disaster. You have people who are letting things fall apart because it's not the procedure. Right. You're not bringing this to the right person who's supposed to then bring it to the guy who makes the decisions. You know, you have this phone call that apparently happens between FDR and the emperor. There's the way that you're supposed to do things, which, of course, if you're in the military, that's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why you have rank. Especially in the Navy, when you're on a boat, it's really important to follow things by the proper procedure.
Yeah, because the other thing that's going on throughout this is that we've got the general.
Oh yeah,
of the United States Army, and he is getting a sense that something is going on. He's in communication with the guys at Pearl. He is constantly getting this increasing sense that something is going on. We also have
and then his handwriting is hard to read.
Right.
Oh,
no. But he tries to go to the White House and talk to Roosevelt, but he's not there.
Yeah.
And
then there's this telegram that gets sent, but it's not marked urgent, so it's just put in the little mailbox.
Yes.
I do think there is a version of this story that is incredibly tense.
Yes.
Because there is already stuff in this that makes me feel like
just
very
us talking
anxious.
about
the details all work. It's like if you have, we have some really great detail-oriented filmmakers. Like if David Fincher was making this movie, right, he'd be able to keep your interest just by the sheer exuberance of how interested in the subject he is. Like Zodiac doesn't make sense for why it's that good.
It's one of the best movies ever made.
It's not really, at the end, they're not even really investigating the Zodiac anymore. They're just hanging out because they ruined their lives.
Right.
And it's
chasing
still
the Zodiac.
I watched that movie, and then I watched it again the next day.
Yeah, I honestly, it's kind of a comfort watch for me.
Yeah.
Like you put it on in the background, and it makes you work harder for some reason because it is just the pace
sometimes,
is so good.
especially in the second act here, the meticulousness does keep the thing moving.
Yeah.
Right. This is a full hour, and it doesn't. It's almost like a James Cameron action sequence. It's like it's really, really long, and it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't feel as long as the fucking action sequence in Pearl Harbor. I can tell you that.
No, but like you watch something like
end.
Well, you watch the thing in Titanic, right? Which is like the first half, I feel like is the love story or whatever. But once you actually get into like the boat hitting the iceberg everything is like meticulously crafted to this minute, to the second, and the pace is so relentless that you're like, okay, so even if you are a Titanic head, even if you know everything that's coming, you still feel that anxiety of like, oh, I know when it happens, it's still a surprise.
Right.
Same thing with Pearl Harbor. You know the attack is coming.
Right.
But even if you don't know the specifics, it still hits.
Well, I think there's a couple ways that you could potentially portray that, because just talking with you guys just now about all of these different moving pieces, I completely agree with you, AJ, that there is a world in which these are different moments that each ratchet up the tension because of the fact that the stakes are clear and the focus is clear. Unfortunately, this movie has all of these moments and they're not really differentiated from each other. And that's why you're not entirely sure what the significance of each thing is.
Yes.
Rather than contributing to this ongoing sense of like, oh shit, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? It is just like these random things, and the weight of each moment is unclear. It makes me think about, because you had mentioned David Fincher.
Yeah.
I would be interested to see like an Armando Iannucci version of this.
There's more humor in it too. Yeah.
Because I mean, if you've seen In the Loop, it is not dissimilar from this movie, except
it's about the intel failure leading to the Iraq War.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But that all builds up. And the thing about In the Loop is that the scope is smaller. It's more focused, right?
Yeah.
This one, there are so many people it's so difficult to keep track of.
Right.
It's hard to know where the chain of command is failing, really, because you don't know. All these white people look the same.
And
they sure do.
So many important people who are not on screen, who are never on screen. And you're just like, well, and they're the ones who are actually the most important people, which is part of what they're trying to do, is showing like the people who know what's up and can't get it across, and then the people who don't know, but you need a little bit more of the people you don't know, right? Because then that gives you even more conflict too, of someone who is resisting or rejecting something. But the other thing is that now that we're just in this full hour and change of action and destruction and bombing and violence, is that it still has a more conservative sensibility with how it portrays violence.
Yeah, this is a G-rated movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. I mean, if it were released today, it would be PG, but like...
There's men on fire.
Yeah.
There's
or maybe even PG-13.
But like, you'll have guys standing next to a window, right? There's the part where the mess hall gets like bombed, but it doesn't look like the building itself gets bombed. It's like the bomb falls in front of it.
Right.
It's stylized in a dry way. When I was writing the note, it's like the violence just doesn't really feel all that violent.
It's not kinetic, yeah.
And then when I wrote that note, as I was like mid-sentence, they show one bomb get dropped on a ship and it blows a guy's hat off.
Yeah.
And you see it's a real shockwave that actually hits that stuntman, and then it cuts to him falling off of the ship. That is one of the most like shocking things. It's such a vibrantly violent moment.
Yeah.
And you don't really have another like it in the rest of the film.
There are a couple, but you do have to like squint for them.
Yeah.
There's like stuff where like the planes are starting to blow up, because here's the thing. The violence against like machinery in this thing is brutal and awesome.
Yeah.
It genuinely feels like an 80s action movie. Like,
oh my God,
it's like
those
the adrenaline that
fucking planes.
Well, I was watching the stuntmen run away from them. There's one where a plane,
they are running out of time.
yeah, and I literally wrote the note, get out of there. Like, because there was really like
it's dangerous.
There was a plane that would explode in front of this guy, and you see him like fall over and then crawl on all fours to like scurry behind cover.
He's not acting.
This was
these stuntmen were in danger.
This is one of the same second unit directors as the Charlton Heston Ben-Hur, which also has some really impressive violence in it.
And some of it
no one
was
died.
fake.
No one died. Nope, you're wrong. That's the silent movie. Everyone thinks it's the Charlton Heston movie.
And I said some of it was fake. I didn't say anyone died.
No, all of it was fake. Because the movie where people got hurt and one actually died was the 1920s Ben-Hur, not the 1950s Ben-Hur.
This is a teachable moment.
Yes. Yes, this is one of these things that I hold so dear. I'm a big fan of Ben-Hur. Sorry, guys.
Right. Well, and this is
the author of that book, former governor of New Mexico. But
this is such a beautiful,
did not have,
teachable moment. It reminds me of like the conclusion of a Pearl Fartber play.
Where everyone just comes together
and someone lectures them on the fact that there were no horses or humans who were killed on that set. It's just a carryover from the 1920s production.
Right.
The director was very mad. He kept getting asked in press conferences how many people, and he's like, you know what? Fuck it. 50 horses died, and so did 3 stuntmen. Are you happy?
That's the Farper play that won the Pulitzer, right?
Yeah. Her worst one.
Why is it always the worst one that wins the Pulitzer?
I don't know. It's a cast of 26.
That just reminds me of and this is not a joke, the time that I saw Eugene O'Neill's Strange Interlude.
Yeah.
Which is like a fucking 4-hour-long play.
It's not a good play.
It's so bad.
4 hours is on the shorter end for Eugene O'Neill, though.
Yeah,
it's like Beyond the Horizon is like 5.5.
There was a production that of Strange Interlude that went up in New York, I want to say like 8 or 9 years ago. That was, I think, 5.5 hours long. And it wasn't because of the text. It was because of the screaming and the long pauses.
I saw Moon for the Misbegotten. At Williamstown with Audra and her husband, Will Swenson.
Nice.
Mormon film star Will Swenson.
Right. Yes.
And that is a short play. They had cut at least 40 minutes of text out of it. It was 3 hours long. And I don't know, boys. Nothing happened. There's a point where
that play is just hanging out,
There's
man.
a point
That's
where they're
vibes.
talking about an ice pond, and it's like, yeah, that's where you used to get your ice, was from a dedicated pond, I guess. And then they make a guy wet, and then that's like 45 minutes, and we just keep going. It was a beautiful set, though, designed by Ming Cho Lee.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
that I helped construct.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
and how much were you paid for that? That was my question.
No money, negative money, because I paid to be there.
Oh God!
Broadway's back.
Broadway's back.
Broadway's back.
And Williamstown is not.
Yep. And you know what else isn't back? Pearl Harbor.
True.
No,
but we will rebuild it. And here's where things get a little bit weird. Is that as much as I don't like the movie Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay, he is at least making artistic choices.
Sure.
Yeah.
This film is mostly just kind of
trying not to. It's
deliberately trying not to.
Well, it doesn't want to bias you, right? And I think that's interesting, that it is very true that you can manipulate somebody to feel any particular way through the language of film, right?
Yeah, of course.
And the purpose of this project is to be as detached and objective as possible throughout.
Yes.
And so even the action sequences, which are really pretty impressive and involved actual planes blowing up, including a plane that they like spin up and it's going down the tarmac and it explodes.
Crazy.
Yeah.
There's a plane. So there's a section here where American bombers that are called in are coming in, and this is part of the confusion with the radar. They're like, oh, you're just seeing the American bombers that are relocating, and one of them can't get its gear down because it's getting shot at by the Americans now, and it's like there's just Japanese planes all around it, and the others kind of peel off and land in other places, and it can't get all of its gear down, so it's just landing lopsidedly and has to sort of crash land. That's real footage of a plane that couldn't get its gear out in San Diego. Yeah. And they were just like, get the camera rolling, get the camera rolling. Can we land it? Cool, let's land it.
Yeah. And they did. And it's really striking that you see the propeller bend on itself in a way that you just wouldn't if this were like staged in any way.
Yeah.
When they're trying to get the landing gear down, they send their like little technician guy down to like wheel down,
turn the crank
and wheel the thing down. And
that's another one of those scenes where like the intention there from an acting perspective is not what is required.
No. So here's the thing.
Looks like he doesn't even try.
Yeah, not at all. God forbid I ever find myself in a combat scenario because I would be that guy who would come back and be like, crank's not working. And they're like, did you try? And I'm like, I guess. And then he goes and tries again. He comes back. He's like, it's still not working. Well, I mean, we can't land the plane, but I tried. I'm trying so hard.
That really
guys.
is the vibe of that guy.
Come on, I'm so tired.
It's like if they cast like Don Knotts to play the role or something. Oh, crank just won't go. I'm trying everything. Put my whole weight into it.
But of course, the other piece of this is the exploding ships, right?
Yeah.
Now, one important piece here, and they make note of this at multiple points, is that the intention of this attack was to destroy all of these American carriers that were stationed at Pearl Harbor, thus destroying the U.S. Navy's ability to project power into the Pacific Ocean. However, all but one of the carriers were actually out of harbor at that time.
Yeah, just shit luck for the Japanese there. Like it just happened to be that way. But they were able to block the harbor. Like there's a point where you can see the pilots are all like, okay, like, bomb this one right now, because then that way it's going to stop up everything. But they don't get to do what they were hoping that they could accomplish.
So what we do get, of course, is the destruction of all of these destroyers and battleships.
Yeah.
And what I would be curious to hear from both of you is like, how did you feel about these scenes, particularly as compared to Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor?
A lot of the stuff turned into slapstick for me just because so much of it was very staged.
The close-ups of guys on the ships.
The close-ups of guys on the ships. I think that there's just, again, we're just getting this very like dioramic view of Pearl Harbor, so we don't get the specificity of Bay's portrayal of things. Case in point, the character of Doris Dory Miller, who is the cook, very famously.
Yeah, and we see Dory Miller here too.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I missed him.
Of course you would,
because it's just like
it's just some guy. It's like,
if you know Dory Miller, or if you've like read the book and know the exact sequence of events, you will see a black man who goes and mans the gun.
But that's Cuba Gooding Jr. in Pearl Harbor.
Which they build up his whole day leading up to it, and they lead up to his like very heroic, I'm taking you down kind of thing. And in this one, it's just another sailor who runs up to a gun and shoots at the sky.
He very well may have been an extra, like paid a day rate. Like that's it.
He has no lines. He just takes it and he shoots. And I think that's just sort of indicative of the whole different approach, right? Is that Bay is interested in these very bombastic sequences, in these explosions, but also that there are these stock characters that are going through it. This film is just like, we're just showing you the thing, and if someone registers with you, that's great, but it's not necessary for what we're doing.
If something happens, whatever. Like, I think because also we talked about this with like Bay and the immense violence that you see, the sort of portrayal of America as the victim of this violence. That is our perspective on Pearl Harbor at the time that Bay's movie comes out, is like, look at this horrible thing that was done to us. Look at all of this suffering that was incurred to us by our enemies. And this movie is more interested in the intelligence failure. This movie is more interested in just like, here's where it is. And so it's a lot more tasteful. I think it's worried too about the families of the survivors.
Right.
You know, you get the sense of the men who drowned, trapped in the ship as it capsized. You don't actually really watch the ship, even watch the ship capsize.
Yeah.
You see men in a room. There's a lot of water coming in.
Right.
You see one guy get out. You see a bunch of flames, and that's the extent of it.
Right.
It's sort of playing off of that generational knowledge of what happened at Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Yeah.
You're filling
They
in the
don't need
blanks.
to be told what happened in the USS
Yeah.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually do think that is effective because my brain did fill in what happened because I've seen the film Titanic, and you know, and it's horrible
Like,
and terrifying.
I've been to Pearl Harbor. I did the whole tour.
And you went out over the Arizona?
Yeah.
Wait, how you went to Pearl? What do you mean you went to Pearl Harbor? It doesn't exist anymore.
What? Who said that?
Oh, that's continuity. It was. I do. I do think it was very interesting that the guy you said who crawled out of there and went and like to go tell the captain that the bottom was flooding. He was like,
Yeah.
the bottom of the Arizona is flooding, and the captain's like, "Have you tried like I don't know releasing the water?" There's so much of it.
We're listing 7 degrees to starboard.
We're listing 7. It's going to 8 degrees. I think we should have been. I think the. Sorry, I'm sorry, Brian. You broke me. The stupefaction.
The other extra, by the way, who I really, really like in this movie is the guy who mans the captain's wheel, and he's just putting one hand up and one hand down.
Straight up.
He's just
It's straight up like you watch any movie from
So
the 40s through the 60s
So
where someone's
good.
driving a car and they're just moving their hands
It's just
like
doing
a
that with the
goddamn
wheel.
maniac.
And it's like, you would not be moving the wheel this much.
They taught you that at Juilliard. They taught you that in school back then. If you're driving a car,
That's
you really
right.
got to sell it to them.
That's right. Thanks, Paul Lynde. What was that?
You gotta sell it. Listen, I was driving Zsa Zsa Gabor around right before she was dating Henry Kissinger. And let me tell you, that coochie, you could smell it from the back seat. That's very misogynistic, but that's what Paul Lynde
That's
was
what Paul
like.
Lynde did. That's what
I
he does.
don't agree.
No, look, we don't endorse him. It's just, he was...
You even if you stan your queens, you understand that they're problematic.
Well, here's the thing, gay men can also be misogynistic.
That's true.
I think we've all learned a valuable lesson today.
That really is the lesson of Pearl Harbor when you think about it.
Yeah,
Speaking of misogyny, I love the scene.
Admiral Husband.
Where
Admiral
it's not Admiral Husband, it's the other guy. He's like driving.
Admiral Wife.
He is driving. He's having his wife drive him around. He's like, "Shut up and drive, woman."
Again, they're trying to do a joke and they just can't.
Right.
Yeah, no, she hands him a hot dog at one point, which I thought was just deeply strange.
I feel like
where does she get the hot dog?
I think there's just like missing scenes
He's got
that
a
they
Coke.
cut.
He's just got a bottle of Coke.
Of Coke. There's also
Coca-Cola, to be clear.
And I'm sure this is something that, like, if you read the books that this is based on, there's probably some really interesting recounting of his day where he's trying to get this intel to these people,
And it was like,
and
his wife
literally
gave him a hot dog.
driving around the city
Right.
of Washington D.C.
But the problem
and getting a
is-
hot dog and a Coca-Cola.
That's a whole story,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you would need to make a movie work with
my
that
movie.
piece.
Yeah.
You would need to make a movie that is mostly about that guy. Instead, it's just about everyone, everywhere, all at once.
This is oops, all stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy's story is just Batman with the bomb. Where he's just running around, and then there's nuns, and there's ducks, and then there's a hot dog.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
Oh my God, JC. A bomb.
A bomb.
There was I maybe it was just the brightness on my TV.
Yeah.
But there were entire things that I'm pretty sure were just like they just filmed like the sea at night, and there's just nothing.
No,
you can see nothing.
It is okay.
See a little bit awake.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a LG OLED TV, which
Me
allows
too.
for true blacks, and I make sure to calibrate my display in such a way that I am able to see the full detail of the cinematic picture. And I couldn't fucking see shit.
Admiral, my TV doesn't work.
Yeah.
Have you tried like calibrating it again?
That sounds really hard.
The scene of the guy, turning the crank on the plane, or failing to, reminds me a lot.
I love turning crank on plane.
It's true, you do. I've been on planes with you.
I make that bathroom look like Ong's hat.
Come on.
So that scene, the
Yeah.
guy's turning the crank, or trying to, on the plane.
Right.
Yeah.
He's
which
cranking
you
out. Soldier Boy.
famously have done no bits about that have maybe gotten cut. We'll see.
I think you should at least
What
keep turning the bathroom into Ong's hat. I think
was pretty good.
that's pretty good.
What it reminds me of is Dr. Strangelove. And
Yes.
all the scenes on the plane,
Yes.
including the hardware malfunctions, the equipment malfunctions, the things that aren't firing correctly or releasing correctly. The difference here is that in those scenes, Kubrick does such an amazing job of really feeling like you're inside that bomber.
Oh, it's so
It's
claustrophobic.
tight.
Yes.
And here it's like a Hollywood set. It's
Yes.
a big
Yes.
rectangular space that is, got plane stuff.
It
This
reminded
is
me
a
of Catch-22
problem-
a little bit.
This is a problem
Yeah.
with all of the scenes that are inside of a canopy, where it just doesn't feel real at all.
Yeah, I
It doesn't even feel like the relative tightness of like Star Wars, right?
No,
7 years later.
No, but I do feel that like it's a little bit more effective in the Japanese planes because there's just more people in there, so it does feel more crowded. But you're right, it does not feel like something like Top Gun, for example, which makes you really feel like you're inside the cockpit.
Or Top
of a
Gun
plane.
Maverick, which really makes you feel like you're in
makes
there.
you feel inside there. I do think there's something that this movie does particularly well, which is it doesn't shy away from the racism of the time, in that it is a co-production with a Japanese company, but they still portray the white people as being incredibly racist. Which, let us be very clear, they were.
Yeah.
There was.
So were the Japanese, but we just don't have as many opportunities here.
I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like their mission is much more clearly defined, and they are only going to be interacting with each other.
We get like a mention of Indochina. That's about it.
Yep.
Yeah. But here we get a scene where there are messages that are being sent out, and one of the people who comes up to the desk in order to get one of those messages to like deliver it to one of the captains or whatever is in fact like a Japanese American.
Yes.
And
The
there's-
little boy.
Yeah, the little boy. And there's like a moment of tension.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Where where the guy's like, I don't know if I want to give you this note or not.
And he didn't even say it. It's just a look.
It was all in just a look. And of course they used the slur throughout the course of it. That was
the Japanese,
for the Japanese throughout. It is jarring, but it does feel like it's a part of the
exactly
world.
what they were saying.
Yeah. And again, because they're going for that documentary feel, but I do think stuff like just the giving the look, for example, to the little boy, that was something that they added for artistic value. And I think that
Very true.
Yeah, and I do think that is a very. I was shocked to see it, honestly, in a film that is usually like shown in schools. You know, like I think that's most people's exposure to Tora.
It's you don't see these guys around the neighborhood. You don't see these guys at home. It's just like it's this interaction that is not kind of the characteristic interactions that you've been seeing throughout this movie.
Right.
And then this little tiny moment happens, but it sticks with you.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, because it is a moment of silence, and it is a moment that is very well acted, I think, too.
Not like that radar dish.
Not like that radar
dish.
Not Rosencrantz and Guildenstern trying to find a phone.
And also not like to the point of the scenes on the ships. There's one part where there's a ship that's about to go down, and there's a guy who just goes, "Abandoned ship," at like a just slightly above room level volume. It's really, this is the thing about this movie for me, is I really wanted to love it. I really did, because...
And there are moments that I think are really quite something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Part of it is just that I do like kind of old-timey dad movies in many ways.
Yeah.
I like when a movie tries to be something that is fictitious, that is still a documentary-style approach.
Yeah.
I think the problem for me just came down to the fact that, like, there were just too many moments that felt out of place because the direction was so wildly inconsistent.
Yeah.
And even though there were so many cool technical pieces and occasional artistic flourishes, it just by and large felt flat. And that was frustrating. And, I think it's just been kind of funny recording this episode too, because there have been so many times where we've just been like, okay, I don't feel like talking about this. Let's do some bits, you know, because that's also kind of what watching this movie is like.
Yeah.
Where there will be moments that pull you in. You'll be like, whoa, that is something. And then there will be like a 5 minutes of just guys jumping, and not even like in a way that appears realistic, but they're just kind of like
there's no cause and effect. You just start seeing guys jumping. You don't see bomb hits, fire spreads, the guy jumps, they're in the water, which you, to its credit, you do get that sequence of events in Michael Bay's movie.
Yeah, right. I mean, the biggest moment that I think sticks with me from Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor is when the ship is listing over to its side, and you've got all the people hanging onto the hull and then sliding down it.
Right. Which is, he stole from Cameron.
Yeah, sure did.
And after a while, the actual attack on Pearl Harbor starts to bleed together for me because the first, when you first see those planes explode, holy shit, what a trick.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's so visceral.
You first see a ship explode. Holy shit, what a trick.
Yeah. But then I start to lose track of what's happening, or there's a point where Genda gets back to the ship and it's like, where is the second wave?
Yes.
And I went, what second wave?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And then there's apparently this whole betrayal where they actually don't follow through on their
end of
plan
the
all
movie.
way.
We're just back with Japan. We started with Japan. We're ending with Japan. There's the little moments where we get they finally have declared war according to the Geneva Conventions. I didn't know that Japan was a signatory of the Geneva Conventions.
Well, oh my God, there's that whole subplot with the ambassador to America.
They deliver the declaration
his friend.
He betrays his friend. He pretends
everybody betray me.
Yeah.
And they deliver the declaration of war an hour late after the base has already been attacked.
Because the guy is a slow typist.
Right.
This has also been playing Pearl Harbor as a tragedy for Japan, right? Because this is a thing that is basically suicide that they really don't want to do because it doesn't make strategic sense. They should be shoring up their... if they're also fighting... they're putting the war on two fronts.
Right.
If you're also trying to take Manchuria and everything else and seize all of that, then you got to focus your attention west. And you got to focus your attention south. They're also going east.
And you're only going to have a chance at really decimating the United States Navy if you can pull off destroying all of those carriers, which they couldn't do.
And they didn't know where they were.
Yeah.
They knew that going into it.
And if they did launch the second wave, a lot of their planes would have been shot down. They wouldn't have taken a single carrier because they didn't know where they were.
Right.
Yeah, because you see the U.S. Navy getting more and more prepared and more able to shoot down the planes. And it's just not going to be a good story if they launch the second wave. And so there is this moment of tension where you see Yamamoto's just not going to do it, not going to do it, not going to do it.
Yeah.
And they resolutely turn back around and go home. And then you have that final moment where he talks about the sleeping giant.
Right.
Right. And how this is going to be bad for them.
Because
and
everyone applauds him.
It turns very bad for Japan very quickly. Right. We're at war with them for a long time, but they're in shabby shape after not too long. And this movie knows that it doesn't need to portray some naval mission that no one remembers.
God for that.
Yeah.
It's a third act of Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor.
Oh,
no, because then it cuts back to America finally for the credit roll.
Right.
And you just see the fire and destruction.
Right.
Everything left behind.
And everything they're going to have to clean up. And then it blares, the Tora, Tora, Tora theme, which is just this very striking couple of notes.
Yeah.
That's the end of the film. And then the credits roll and you see all 900 people who are in it. And
which is pretty cool, honestly.
I do like that in America, the American director gets the top billed credit. And in Japan, they flip the credits around so that the Japanese directors get the top billed credit. And he gets the credit for the American sequences. Weirdly enough, the credits are still in English. It really was this thing created in the spirit of true cooperation between Japan and the United States. It's a movie that did not do well when it came out.
No, Roger Ebert fucking hated it.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting too that
didn't have boobs in it.
Right.
Yeah. That it's late 60s, early 70s, Vietnam.
Right.
That's what everyone is thinking about, right? MASH comes out the same year. It's about Korea, but it's not. It's about Vietnam. Right. Patton comes out this same year. The Green Berets came out 2 years earlier. That's John Wayne's absolute fucking dog shit ass movie about how great it is that America is killing Vietnamese people. And it ends with the sun setting over the Vietnamese coast, which is in the east.
Yeah, that's right. Of course.
Roger Ebert gave that movie 0 stars, right? So there's a principled stance because we're in the middle of this absolute catastrophe.
Yeah.
And Tora 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 is a dispatch from a conservative set from an older generation, from people who want to...
From the greatest generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
From people who are making a slightly different point. They're going down the middle of the road with it.
Yeah.
But I think there's no way to look... In the same way that, like, William Daniels didn't want to get involved in 1776, right?
Right.
Where he was
Right.
like, this war is going on.
Why should we glorify these
Yeah, we don't
people?
need a bunch
Yeah.
of fifes and trumpets and
Right.
flag waving.
But that's what Mama Look Sharp is in there for. That's
Exactly.
the point.
Yeah.
You don't get anything like that in this movie.
And there could be a Mama Look Sharp moment.
Totally
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there should be. I don't know.
And I think you could interpret with the Japanese side of the movie being like, oh yeah, here is the great tragedy of getting involved in a war that you have no business being involved in.
Right.
You've got your own incursions that you're dealing with, and now you're attacking someone that you shouldn't.
And that all of this is coming from the hubris of empire,
Yeah,
right? That
yeah.
like if they had actually expressed the reality of Japan's desire to basically control the entirety of East Asia and the entire area all the way down to the South Pacific, then yeah, like maybe they could have gotten there, but
Yeah.
they chose not to. And I think part of it was just the political realities. Like, and when I say political, I mean like the actual politics of working with another country that has its own vested interest in seeing its military portrayed in a specific way. You know, you have to deal with that. And there's also the interpersonal politics of it as well.
Yeah.
So it's a strange movie. I've never really seen a movie that is weird in this specific way.
It's weird in a very boring way.
Yeah.
But
but occasionally, you know, it does sing. You know,
is something-
I was actually really digging it in the first like 20 minutes
Me
or
too.
so,
Yeah.
because it was really kind of moving
because
along.
it's the Japanese stuff in the first 20
Yeah, it
minutes.
is. It really
yeah.
is that, and it's all about like it's all about this history that I just didn't
History
really ever
and
know
there's
about.
like there's
and-
all this procedure and everything, and procedure is really fun to watch, especially when it's unfamiliar to you.
because then you can study its intricacies and how it's different from what you know, and
Yeah.
it's just,
Right.
like it really does shine. And also, I think the Japanese actors are just superior to the American
Spectacular,
actors
They're by a country
Yeah,
mile.
you
by
get
a
like
country mile.
I mean, you get Joseph Cotton in this movie, and he doesn't do fucking shit. It's
They
like
know
you were in
nothing.
Citizen Kane.
Do you think that Pearl Harbor is a story that is adaptable, or do you think that it is just one of those kind of events that like will never fully congeal around a good story?
I mean, we're going to have more years to find out.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
I think...
Well, call your shot.
Yeah, I think that to portray what happened in its entirety will never make for an interesting story in terms of like a movie or like a piece of narrative media, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that an interesting narrative requires characters, tension, and forward movement, and it requires that the stakes of anything that is going on be relevant to the characters in question so that we are able to sort of go along with them.
That's why you need a love triangle.
That's right, Brian.
That's what,
Well, no, and I think there are stories there are other Pearl Harbor movies. There are older Pearl Harbor movies. This movie has gained its reputation over the years because it gets shown in classrooms.
Right.
It gets shown on TV. It was always in circulation on AMC, and the special features actually have a couple of AMC produced like documentaries for the movie.
shit.
I think they still show it on TCM sometimes.
I bet.
I mean, has this movie sort of been supplanted by Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor? What do they show?
no.
What do they
This
show
is-
in schools now? I guess is
Still
the question.
Tora if they're going to show something.
if they're showing anything other than like a
Because
documentary. Yeah.
Even though it's boring, you do come away from it
mostly correct.
having
Yeah.
learned something about what's going on. You know, you
Yeah.
are not learning a counterfactual version of history.
If I showed this to my students, which I have, all those students of mine, I would then make them write a research essay on the goofs.
Oh, the goofs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would literally then have to read 30 versions of the IMDb goof
Those
page.
airplanes weren't made by Mitsubishi.
Teacher, I wanted to write the essay, but it was too hard.
I think that the thing about Pearl Harbor that is so interesting to me is that you can learn a lot about America at different points in time and learn about different kinds of Americans in terms of how they interpret this event. And it's one that, the conspiracy, and maybe at some point we'll talk about the conspiracy theory side of things, but those are less interesting. You know, it's sort of like how people talk about Shakespeare scholarship. The authorship question is not that interesting. Like you either play around with it or you don't, but then you're not really talking about the interesting things about the subject.
Right.
with Pearl Harbor and the role that it plays in our society and the role that it plays generationally. Whether you're someone who fought or whether you're someone who's anti-war, whether it's 1970 or 1941 or 1946 or 2007, we're always kind of drawing something else from it. It's a day that's supposed to live in infamy because it's like one of the biggest embarrassments that the United States ever faced after, like, I don't know, Little Bighorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's like, and Little Bighorn isn't some atrocity. It's just a battle where we really got owned, and then everyone talked about it again for the next 150 years.
Yeah. And then the only real other analog to it, obviously, is 9/11.
Yeah, but in the American psyche, the idea that Pearl Harbor, we were attacked,
right,
which then jostled us into doing the right thing, which was stopping the Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
There is a redemption to this.
The sleeping giant and into the awake giant.
Yes.
The woke giant.
Pearl Harbor made us woke. I think that the only way that Pearl Harbor can be told as a good, like, interesting story, like in terms of just a narrative, a fictional narrative, is unfortunately it has to be Japanese because it is that is the group that wanted something and then got the thing. It is not reactionary in the way that the American one is.
This movie was not very successful in the US. It did fine. It made back its budget at least.
Yeah.
Big hit in Japan.
I'd imagine.
And one of the comparisons that gets drawn is with The Longest Day, right? That's the invasion of Normandy. We win that.
Right.
Yeah.
We do better. So it's something that's fun to celebrate. And I think it's something where Japan is now demilitarized, right? They don't have an army and navy or an air force. They have the self-defense naval for whatever. They're constantly occupied by the United States, and they will remain so for as long as history keeps moving in the direction that it does.
Sure.
Much to the chagrin of everybody in Okinawa.
Yeah.
But this was like a moment in 1970 where they're able to acknowledge a victory of theirs.
Yeah.
And it's one that's like, it's against a military target. They're playing dirty, but it's at least not like Nanjing.
Right.
Or like any of the just straight up fucking atrocities. This isn't about like doing the Bataan Death March.
No, these were military targets. They actively did not try to kill civilians. I mean, they did.
They didn't bomb a hospital like in the Michael Bay movie.
Yeah. Like, I mean...
or in Gaza.
Yep.
This is something that, in a way, portrays the attack on Pearl Harbor as something that was, if not a noble act, at least something that came from a place of, I don't know, honor, maybe, for lack of a better way of putting it. And when you look at what the Japanese Empire actually was and what this action was in service of, it kind of leaves you feeling a little bit uncomfy, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There's that moment where Yamamoto is sitting with his eyes closed before the attack actually begins. And it's like, they're like, sir, it's about to happen. And it zooms in on his face and he has his eyes closed. And then the attack happens and he opens his eyes and stares right into the camera. And it gave me chills because it's this, I mean, first of all, brilliant moment of acting, but you were seeing the wrath of the Japanese Empire awaken in front of you, of this imperialist army. You saw the wrath of the atrocities that they committed against the Koreans and against the Chinese, all in this one look.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think of Pearl Harbor as a piece of Japanese myth making, something that we have much less of a window on.
Yeah.
Right.
We're all stupid Americans.
Like we're all waving through that window.
The growth of the Japanese Empire at the absolute height of it, as it's sowing the seeds of its own destruction in a matter of years, and how the engagement with America is given so much attention, and how they make this movie about what's happening in America. And it's just not, they're not going to make a movie about the grand tragedy of what they did in Korea or what they did in Manchuria.
No.
That's what the Yasukuni Shrine is for.
Yeah. like there's a movie that just came out that has been very controversial in Japan about an earthquake that struck in 100 years ago. It was a movie made for the 100th anniversary of this. And it led to incredible paranoia. And there were towns that just went and rounded up foreigners, mostly Koreans, and killed them. The movie is about a group of people that was rounded up and killed after this earthquake who weren't even foreigners. They were from a different part of Japan and they just had a different accent that to the people in that village made them sound Korean.
Holy shit.
And it's something that a lot of formal education, conservative politics, TV pundits don't really want to engage with at all. You know, it's like the difficulties of like, why did Germany engage with this kind of stuff? And it's not even necessarily because of the American occupation, because the American occupation didn't really push that on Japan, pushed other things.
Yeah.
Made them censor all their porn.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because some of the younger generations of Germany were really the ones that started to impose it, right? There was this question on the German left and West Germany. This wasn't necessarily as big of a part of the East German curriculum.
Sure.
The guilt thing.
Right. My German teacher in high school was like, we were taught this when we were kids because it could never happen again. We could never let this happen again. And what you see in Germany now is that generation learned that lesson, right? But the next generation was like, well, we didn't do that shit. Right. Maybe there was something to this. And now we see the rise of the far right in Germany.
And Japan didn't have really any of that kind of stuff. And America doesn't teach its children about its war crimes.
It doesn't teach us jack shit.
Yeah, Korea's just like the thing where we talk about how it's the forgotten war, but it's just because we're supposed to honor the veterans who bravely served in Iceland and then did a game show.
Rip Grandpa.
With 11 years of an anti-war show, you know, the MASH being on TV and being about Korea and sort of being about Vietnam, it still just kind of comes across as anti-war rather than anti the very deliberate decisions that we made as an empire upon the soil of another country that has a reverberating effect to this day, right? Korea cannot still open its borders.
Right.
With North Korea. There still cannot be any free passage. And why? Because the U.S. didn't like the terms of the deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And we got to call the shots. It's this interesting thing where we cannot engage with the real politics, the realpolitik. You know, right? Kissinger's just supposed to be the statesman, the really smart guy.
God, it always fucking comes back to Kissinger, doesn't it?
He was around for 100 years.
Yeah. He's such an idiot. He thought the global South didn't matter. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, you see, he's the kind of ignoramus that drives policy, right?
Yeah, and murders so many fucking people.
And maybe that's the thing that we can take away, at least this time around, is that like the project of empire is a fundamentally foolish project, right?
Yeah.
It is the project.
It's one that builds up its own ignorance.
Yes. Yeah. Because the alternative would be to try to learn what it is that you don't know. And the moment that you know what you don't know, all of a sudden you stop being so bold and so headstrong.
Yeah. Then you have known unknowns. And unknown unknowns, and then known knowns.
Thank you, Don.
And then unknown knowns, even.
Thank you, Donald Rumsfeld. Appreciate that.
If you would like more unknown knowns,
if you'd like more war criminals in your life,
like more unknowns, or perhaps another Pokemon, Clefairy. I don't know.
You know,
missing no.
Ooh,
no, that's not a Pokemon. That's not a Pokemon,
but it will crash your game.
No, it sure will. And what won't crash your game is our Patreon. There we go. See?
Yeah.
Best in the biz. Let's go.
Best in the biz. Best in the fucking biz.
Patreon.com/worst of all is our Patreon. $5 a month gets you access to plenty more great episodes just like this one. Every other week, we release it as a premium episode, so that goes behind the paywall. And we got some good shit back there from not too long ago, including a very fun episode that we did with Riley Quinn of Trash Future, where we talked about fucking Neom for 2 hours.
Yeah, Saudi Arabian real estate development and how fucking weird it all is.
So
it's
weird.
Like if the
they keep adding
Cybertruck
districts.
It's like if the Cybertruck was a city.
Yeah. I mean, we recorded that episode a couple weeks ago, and there have already been 2 more projects revealed in Neom.
It's like killing hostages. It's like if you don't meet our demands, we'll announce 2 more
Neom regions,
two
districts,
more Neoms.
projects, hotels, whatever. And the other cool thing is that you will get access to Fancy Movie Time, which is the monthly series that Brian and AJ do, where they talk about movies that are fancy in nature, including most recently Mulholland Drive. So
and coming up soon, The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie and The Exterminating Angel.
Our first double feature. Our double fancy feast.
Getting Buñuel pilled. So check that out. And last but not least, $10 a month also gets you access to Lads Cast, which is our ongoing monthly shooting the shit, totally unscripted thing. We're going to be talking more about Cyberpunk because we didn't get done really. We're talking about it in the main episode.
Mainly we wanted to talk about the hot new DLC. Where it's like you're playing and all of a sudden there's bugs again. It's very fun.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in hearing us talk about Phantom Liberty, check that out too.
I thought I would follow the Emperor's example, Emperor Hirohito's example in the film.
Don't do that.
Oh, not just in the
And
movie.
die in 1989.
That's when I was born.
Oh no.
And
We're laying out the personal effects of Emperor Hirohito in front of AJ to see if he will correctly pick the items that will make him the successor. Because he's also a llama, I guess, in my strange mythology of the world.
I got my groove back, you know.
A different kind of llama. Yeah. It's a 1L.
I would like to recite some poetry for you all.
Oh no.
And I hope that by doing so, you will understand my intention and will go out into the world and do my will.
All right, okay.
Do your
bidding.
Do my bidding.
Okay.
Hold it now and watch the hoodwink. As I make you stop, think. You'll think you're looking at Aquaman. I summon fish to the dish. Although I like the chalet Swiss, I like the sushi, because it's never touched a frying pan. Hot! Like wasabi when I bust rhymes. Big like Leanne Rhymes. Because I'm all about value. Bert Kaempfert's got the mad hits. More like Bert Camp Fart.
It is more like that.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
You just did this because I read the Edgar Allan Poe at the end of Mulholland Drive. I'm the worst of all possible Bryans.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. See you next week.